Can you hear us now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for letting us know.
Okay, I'll start again. So this evening's agenda item is to request an amendment to the right-of-way easement 16-88092 for the construction of a driveway coming up from the Pitnall Road through Observatory Mesa Natural Area to properties on the eastern side of Section 6. Following this review, if the Open Space Commission wants to consider a recommendation for City Council, they can do that this evening, or they can do that at a future Open Space Commission meeting upon request. I'll give you a little bit of background on the history of the right-of-way. In 1986, the right-of-way was purchased from the Arizona State Land Department for the development of a public roadway. It has not been developed and remains a primitive dirt road, approximately 10 to 15 feet wide, and provides legal access to a series of private properties on the eastern side of Section 6. The city of Flagstaff purchased Observatory Mesa Natural Area from the Arizona State Land Department in 2013 using funds from an Arizona State Parks Growing Smarter grant in 2004 voter-approved bond, open space bond. This property was purchased for the express purpose of setting it aside legally as protected open space. Letters were sent out during the purchase process informing neighbors about the purchase process and the conservation easement constraints. Because the right-of-way was created prior to the conservation easement, Arizona State Parks does recognize the rights of holders of the right-of-way to access the private properties. The right-of-way allows for the construction of a public roadway on the property protected by the conservation easement. It is restricted to the existing right-of-way easement. The city of Flagstaff inherited all existing easements on their property when it was required. And this includes the easement that runs across Section 6 to these private properties that are adjacent to the natural area. As part of the acquisition process, a conservation easement was granted to Arizona State Parks, which outlines the type of access and development that is permitted on the property. The intent of the easement and the natural areas to preserve the area and provide public recreation opportunities. It's unclear if stepping outside the existing easement to build a road to meet engineering standards is prohibited by the conservation easement. The conservation easement does state that in the baseline documentation to prevent any use of the property that will significantly impair or interfere with the conservation values of the property. The existing easement that will be discussed this evening was included in the baseline documentation when the property was purchased. We are here to review the property owner's request and to amend the easement and consider if the request meets the objectives of the conservation easement. One final point, and then I'll turn it over to Kevin Finsel, is that the Arizona State Parks direction was for the city of Flagstaff to review this request, and then following the city's review, the state will presumably review the request as well.
Commission, my name is Kevin Finsel. I'm the Deputy City Attorney for the City of Flagstaff. You don't see me often, which is good for you. But I'm here tonight, not in necessarily my legal capacity. I'm here because I represent sustainability before when open space was in sustainability, and now I represent open space as part of my workload. So I'm very knowledgeable of this area and these requests, this most recent request as well as prior requests. So they asked me to come in to talk about the history of those requests and what's plan. So that's why you're seeing me. It's a little odd, but I'm helping Robert and Rebecca out here best I can. Does this seem? Did you have anything else on here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna use my own maps. So, yeah, I'm gonna use my own maps. So I'm gonna try to share my screen here and see if this works. So I want to start out just giving us an idea of where we're talking about here, and if we need to pull up a Google image, we can. But essentially, we're talking about Section 6 up on Observatory Mesa. So this is area itself. If you're looking at it on a map like you have here, it's that northern piece. So it's Section 6 there. Zoom in.
Can you talk louder?
Instead of yeah. Okay. So section have someone in. Now it's, okay. Someone has to be muted.
I got it.
You got it? All right. Sorry. Thank you for letting me know. So we're talking about section 6 up here. And so if you orient yourself up there on the Mesa, I call it the northern parcel. It's probably wrong, but that's the section we're talking about.
Can I interrupt just for a second? Robert, on your slide, you had a color picture of that showed the whole Observatory Mesa thing.
Yeah, we can share that after.
You want to share that?
Yes,
Because
sure.
I think for most of us, that's the thing we have in mind.
If you want to show that one first, that's fine. I'm just trying to orient you all. So if you have a better picture, feel free.
Sure.
Yep.
There's section 6 there.
And maybe you could orient us
Okay.
on that section.
Yeah, so there you go. So that's Observatory Mesa. Those are the 4 parcels the city purchased. Section 6 is that, again, I call it the northern parcel. And where he has circled in red is the area where the easement runs, and I'll show that on a separate map. And then to the east of section 6 is the private property owners who are making this request, and I'll show that on a map as well. So, yeah. So this is Robert's map. Does that help? I'm going to switch back to mine because I want to make a comment on it. But essentially, this is a Google image showing section 6 with the yellow line is the easement or the right of way. I call it an easement. It's a really interesting document. It's titled right of way. It's for the construction of a road. That's what the state granted back in the 80s. But they also call it an easement. So if you hear me reference it as an easement or right of way, I'm talking about the same thing. So yellow is the easement. That's the 30-foot wide easement that runs along that northeastern section or part of section 6 down, and it connects to those private parcels that are outlined in red. So we have seven parcels that we're really talking about. And those are the private property owners who have come to the city trying to figure out how they can build a home on their land. And do it in a way that meets our engineering standards and our fire department standards for that road. And that's ultimately why we're here. If I can switch back in case. And I want to show this because this is actually the Alta survey, as they call it. I don't even know what Alta stands for, but it's the survey. This is what the city received when we purchased the property. And I think it's important to start here because as you can see, this is the easement we're talking about. We also refer to it as the BLE easement. She is the property owner that was initially granted to. And so this is that easement. So when we purchased this property, it was very clear to the city, and it really should have been very clear to the community, because I know this was passed by ordinance when we decided to purchase this land, that we were taking this subject to these easements. And so the easement we're talking about today. And as you can see, it runs into these property owners. Mr. Hendricks, I believe, is here today, and then some of these other properties have changed. But if I follow the history of the land correctly, Mr. Hendricks purchased the property, or one of the parcels purchased was the B parcel. And when he purchased that parcel, the easement was actually assigned to him. Were we right? You can just nod your head. Sorry, I'm looking at one of the property owners who asked this question too. But it's under Flagstaff Holdings LLC. So they actually hold the easement now. It was assigned to them by the state. And as Robert said, so when we purchased this property as the city, we purchased that property with those easements. So now, as I like to say, we are in the shoes of the state. So now that easement now encumbers our land, which is that section 6. Now we control that easement. So that's why the request from the property owners is to come into the city to ask, can you work with us, essentially is what they're asking us, with this easement so that we can develop. And I want to talk a little bit about why we're here. Am I in the right spot? Okay. So really, as I said, I've dealt with this since we purchased this property. We started getting questions from the property owners up there, and they have changed over time. But I would say since 2015, probably, we've been getting requests from property owners up on that Mesa asking essentially what they can do, how they can use this easement, access their property, what they need in regards to a roadway to access those properties. And when I say it needs, I mean our engineering standards and our fire standards, because that's one of the big issues when you develop back there. Our fire trucks need to get back there if anything happens, as well as our public safety vehicles. Currently, as Robert said, it's a dirt road that has pretty significant slope to it in certain places. It's not a road that a fire truck can get to. So if somebody's going to build back there, we need to have a road so we can access it. And that's essentially why we're here. So the property owners have been coming in over the years. The direction the property owners have received has been a little bit different because we've given them different direction. Before this last group of property owners came in, we had spoken with Arizona Parks and the property owners at the time that were bringing the proposal forward. And we thought the understanding was it was supposed to go to state parks first to get state parks approval. Then once state parks approved, it was supposed to come back to the city for our approval. That then switched this last round. So I think we started up in this past spring with this group of property owners coming in, again, asking some of the same questions, but and looking at different plans and asking how do we build back there? What's required of us to build a road? And then as those conversations progress, what you learn really quickly is that from an engineering perspective, the current easement doesn't really work very well. And when I say the current easement, I really mean the parameters of it, the outline of it on the map. There are some points that easement covers that if you were going to build a road in that easement, it would be pretty darn difficult from an engineering perspective. And you can see that, we'll show it on a map here in a second, but we have a really nice set of plans that the property owners have given us that outlines not only the current easement, but the dirt road. And so you can even see that dirt road, it doesn't follow the current easement. And I think there's reasons for that. It's because of the topography up there on the Mesa. It just hasn't worked over time. So people have gone in and out of that easement for good reason. And I'll actually just show that right now. Let me pull it up. So in working with these property owners, like I said, we started talking with this group in the spring. They came in, had some conversations, worked with them really on solidifying a good set of plans. So that's what took some time in walking through the plans that they initially proposed to the plans that I'm going to show you right now. They've been tweaked a lot, and essentially what staff was doing, and when I talk about staff, I'm talking about fire, our planning department, the legal department, open space. We had a pretty large group in the room trying to share with the property owners what the expectations would be, and also work through the plans to try to get a plan set that had the most minimal impact possible on the Mesa. And that's Robert's job. So Robert's in the room all the time, of course, pushing the open space message and also really standing up for the conservation easement, while at the same time understanding you have property owners who are looking to utilize their property to build homes, and you have the planning group who has their information about what you can do on those parcels, and then fire safety perspective, making sure we get a road that actually works. So all those parties came together, and we ended up with, I'll say it's the best we could come up with. I want to make it really clear as staff up here, we're not taking a position. We're not giving you a recommendation on this. We're just up here presenting what we've worked with property owners on. But through those conversations, we came up with the most recent plan set. And this is really hard to see, especially from the crowd. And I apologize. I don't know a better way, unless Cody does have plans here. Maybe if the commission is good with it, after we walk through this, and maybe you take some public comment, maybe you don't. But if we take a break, maybe we can lay out the plans and people in the audience can come up and look if they can't see it up here. But this was the best we could come up with in presenting this to the commission. But I'll zoom in here the best I can on some of these, and it will be pieces, but I want to show what the property owners have done here with this map. And I'll zoom in even a little bit more. So this is just going to be a small piece of it. I'll try to walk through it the best I can so everybody can see it. So what these lines represent, it's down here in the legend on their plan. So the green line there, that is the outline of the current easement. That's where the current easement would lie on the map. Underneath a lot of this, you'll see a blue line, and it's sort of covered by this outline in black. that blue line though, that's the road. That's the primitive road, as we'll call it. That's the dirt road that's up there. And then the black outline is the requested amendment. So that's where the property owners are saying, we know we have rights that are within the green, but our engineers are telling us it's going to be really difficult to build a road in there, nor would you want to in some cases because of topography. So we're requesting that we adjust it so it becomes the black. And so a couple of things, again, to keep a note of, you can see for the most part, those black outlines kind of hug or that blue line, which is the current dirt road, stays within them. So that's something to consider, right? When we're talking about impacts that any construction up there is going to have. In doing this, what you see is that where the dirt road currently is really the better path to a road from an engineering perspective. And the green really isn't. So that's why they proposed it this way. The red dotted line, that is in working. We wanted the property owners to be really upfront with not only the commission, but we knew we were going to get a turnout. And so we asked our engineer to identify areas where there would be some impacts even outside of an amended easement. And the impacts would be from the construction. So when you're talking, so imagine maybe you have a certain slope that you're trying to construct a road on. You may have to, the construction may actually go outside of that 30-foot easement to enable construction. And that's what those red marks are identifying. But those red marks outside of that easement would be mitigated by the property owner. So I just want to make that really clear here too. So they were very upfront. There was, yes, that area would be impacted, but it would not encompass a road in that red area. It would be an area impacted that would be rehabilitated. I can't take questions right now. Sorry. Unless a commissioner has it. I can always take a question from a commissioner. So maybe if you want to whisper in one of their ears, it's a good question. But so, and I'll follow this path, and you can see where the green goes outside of the black, and again, the green is the current easement. But for the most part, this current design, as I'll call it, really until we get to here, and this part right here, and I don't know where right here, it really stays with the current dirt road. Now, unfortunately, I have not walked this. I have not been up on the Mesa, but I can read maps decently in what I do. And so every time those lines on this map get really close together, that just means it's really steep. So what we're talking about here is like a gorge almost. And so if you were going to follow the easement or even that dirt road, and this dirt road, this section is a pretty steep slope going up. Right. And so when we talk about what our engineering standards and our fire standards require, that slope does not work. So the only way to stay within the current easement or on that dirt road and meet slope requirements, you essentially have to build a bridge. Right? And when we asked their engineer pretty directly, from an engineering perspective, is it possible? I don't know. I don't recall if he told me it was impossible, but the engineer was pretty much saying, yeah, it's pretty darn close to design a road that stays within that easement or stays where that dirt road currently is. So that's why in this section, you see that one area where it goes outside. It's mainly from that topography. Then it just continues up and it ends here. So this is something, and I apologize, I'm probably going to be a little bit all over the place here, but I'll talk about this right now. So you can see the current easement runs all the way along these properties up here in that green. So those are where we get to the private parcels, and the current easements and their rights would allow them to build in that green. In our discussions with the property owners, and again, what we kept telling them was, you're going to get some public comment. We knew this is a very important issue for the community. It's a very important issue for the commission. It's a very important issue for Roberts. Build the best package. So in talking with the property owners about that, we suggested that they propose in their amended easement to extinguish that up there. And that's why you see that dark outline, which is the amended easement, the dark black lines. It ends at that property line. So that is essentially area that would no longer be encumbered by an easement up there. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? I can go up there and walk you through it. And I think that was a good decision by the property owners to do that. So when you hear some of the numbers about the current easement in acreage versus the new easement in acreage, you'll see in the staff summary, it got smaller. That's the main reason why. You see over here on the far right, this hammerhead, we call it, that's a turnaround for the fire trucks. It's over here on the right. That actually, it will be updated. We talked to the property owners about that. They basically took this easement up to their property line, and then the driveway runs along those parcels. And then their initial proposal was to build that hammerhead at the end, with part of the hammerhead being back on city property. Again, we talked about building the best package, and the property owners decided we're going to take that off. And I'm going to look for Cody to nod his head to make sure I'm saying something right here. So that will not be on there either, that last little hammerhead. So essentially, any encumbrance on the city property would end right when it hits those private parcels up there. Trying to think what else we need to talk about with this. We can talk about if the commission wants more detail on the acreage. It's in your staff summary. I don't know it off the top of my head, but we can talk about that. But essentially, when you look at those numbers, it's comparing the current acreage, which I do have. It's what, 3.52? Is that right? To the total of the final easement as proposed by the property owners. And then I think we build in some of when we talk about impact, that's that red. And so this is a good way of looking at those area calculations. It's on their plans. So you can see here this is on their plans. Did we attach this in the staff summary?
Yes.
Okay, so this is in your staff summary. If anybody hasn't seen it, it's on the website, on the city website, under the agenda. These are those numbers. This is how they got calculated. So you can see there the existing green easement 3.54, 1,002. The proposed easement ends up being at the end of the day 2.7 acres. And then the grading beyond that 30-foot easement does make it a little bit bigger. So if you add that, 3.75 is, I'll say, quote unquote, impacted. But then that 1.05 that is impacted is then rehabilitated by property owners. And when I talk about these things, we're talking about conditions. And that was one thing in talking to property owners as well. We talked about a series of conditions. And can you pull those up for me? Sure. Because I'm having to look this way instead of this way. We talked a lot about what the property owners were willing to agree to as conditions that we were really expecting to come from the commission anyway, or from the public. So we talked about the rehabilitation of that area in red that was going to be impacted. We've talked about access to the road in general. So the easement as it is right now is for a public roadway. That's why they called it right away. That would be a little odd up there to build and sorry, I have to back up a second here. When we talk about this road in the staff summary, we talk about it being a driveway. There was a reason for that. It was actually an error. This is actually better defined as a fire apparatus access road. And we'll talk about that standard in a little bit. But the fire apparatus access road is what's needed. But the current easement allows for a public roadway. So we talked with the property owners about whether they'd be agreeable to not having to be a public roadway, rather being a private roadway for access only by vehicle for those properties, and then other access via bicycle and ped. So pedestrian and bicycles could still use that roadway to access Observatory Mesa, but it wouldn't be a public roadway anymore. So when we amend it, we would do that. We would change it to a private roadway with limitations, as I just discussed. We assume that probably where the commission would want to go and the public would want to go. If we're wrong, that's up for the commission to discuss. But the property owners have been agreeable to that.
Extravagant design criteria.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is when I talk about the fire criteria. So this is the criteria for our fire access road. And this is really what drives this, right? So when the property owners come in and say, we want to build a home on our property, planning department says, well, how are you going to access it? And then we start talking about the road to access it. And what does that have to look like? And again, we talked about getting fire trucks and police trucks and water trucks and everything else back there. The current dirt road doesn't work, so that's why they need to construct something different. We landed on a fire apparatus access road, which is a little bit different than the driveway. And the reason why is because fire apparatus access road allows access to 30 dwelling units. So essentially, that's what would be capped back there with this road design. You couldn't have any more than 30 dwelling units. And then these are sort of the requirements. The big one there is the slope. It can't be greater than 10%. So that's when you get to that area we showed on the map, that gorge, why that area doesn't work, because our fire department says it and fire code says it can't be any greater than 10. So that's why they need to take that turn around it. But that's really what we're dealing. I want to get into conditions. That's really what we're dealing with here is, and what the commission needs to consider, and what ultimately the city council needs to consider, is you have some different issues at play here that have some tension between them, right? You have the conservation easement. We purchased this property for a reason. Ideally, you wouldn't touch it. You wouldn't have any impact to this property at all. However, we purchased it with an easement on it. It was already encumbered. That easement, as shown on a map, gives these property owners rights to construct a public roadway back there, right away, essentially. That doesn't work. So now you have property owners who want to build a home, but need some help from the city to say, can we amend that easement for a couple of reasons? One, allow us to build our homes back there and build to the standard you're saying we need to build to. Because again, this isn't their choice, right? Property owners didn't come in and say, we need to build a fire apparatus access road. That's what we told them. So we're saying you need to build this type of road. They're saying we'd love to, but it's really difficult within the current easement. Can you adjust that easement for us? And if you can adjust that easement for us, we'll build this fire apparatus access road. It's only going to be for a max of 30 dwelling units back there, if they even get to that. And please don't take my comment with 30 to suggest that the property owners have said they're going to build 30 homes. And we can get into some of their other limitations on that back there. But that's what we've told them they need to build. And they're just in a position where with the current easement, they just can't do it. So now it comes back to us to say whether or not we want to amend it.
Can you talk about the difference between this fire apparatus access road on city property versus what is in place right now on the county's road that is the Hidden Hollow Road, the dirt road, how that differs?
I have no idea. I'm not county, so I don't know.
Yeah, and I realize that's where
Yeah.
the issue
We can
is.
get you information on that. I mean, that's the question.
I mean, that's obviously all those houses are accessed by a dirt road, a county road. Is this, obviously the city's requiring more than that?
Well, it's really more for slope. So it's still going to be, the current design is not, what is it? It's not paved. It's, I'm forgetting the term.
ABS.
It's ABS. So it's not, don't envision a city road with curb and gutter. That's what it's not going to be that. There won't be sidewalks adjacent to it. It's essentially going to be an ABS road. So it's not quite dirt. It's definitely more improved than dirt. It has to, according to our fire standards, have a little more, that's 80,000 weight, as well as we want to make sure it's something that can be plowed easily. And so I don't know how they do Hidden Hollow. It's probably been by a grader. So it's a little bit of an upgrade, I think, from a dirt road, but it's not asphalt. That's all I can tell you, but we can definitely come back with more information on the differences. I think the key here is that it's not necessarily about the type of road, it's the width. It needs to be 20 feet wide according to our standards. And so it needs to have certain slopes. It can't be steep. And I assume Hidden Hollow meets those anyway right now, if I understand that road correctly. Any other questions from the commission right now?
Yeah, question on the split subdivision. First report I read is we're talking about 114 acres over there.
Okay.
And then it went through, well, it's zoned R rural, whatever, and the potential is for this split and this split. But I came up with a much larger number than 30. So 30 would be something that would be part of the agreement, that you could only have 30, divide 7 parcels into a total of 30 parcels.
So, okay, first of all, don't think of it as parcels, because you can build multiple units on a single parcel. But essentially, this road, yeah, and I don't know how we'll draft it into the revised easement if we go that route. But our fire department has allowed this type of roadway only because it goes up, it's only for areas that have 30 or less dwelling units. Once you go past 30, if the 31st property owner or 31st person came up to build a home, we'd have to deny it unless they had secondary access, which this access is pretty darn hard. Trying to get secondary, probably even harder. So I'm not going to say it can't be done. I don't want to say that. I don't know, but it would be pretty difficult to get that secondary access up there.
So my question is, what is the potential
Yeah.
for density up
Sure.
there?
So these parcels, and do you have the acreage of each one? The large square is 40, right? So the bottom two are each about 20, and the middle one is 40 divided 4 ways. The state law on lot splits. A lot split is defined as a split of a parcel that's 2.5 acres or less. So those wouldn't be lot splits. They're too big. So I've been told by our planning department, if any one of these property owners came in and requested a lot split, it would be denied for that reason, unless the state law changed. But right now, state law, the way we do lot splits, it's for smaller parcels. If you wanted to divide this size parcel, you're talking about a subdivision. And the thing with the subdivision, again, I don't want to say it can't be done, but when you talk about subdivision regulations, and if we need to bring back our planning department to talk about our subdivision regulations and what it requires from a public improvement perspective, and I'm talking roads, water, sewer, when you subdivide, it's way more than this road. So I'm not going to say, and you can ask the property owners, they're here, what their intentions are, but subdividing up there would have a lot of constraints, I'll say, because you got water, sewer issues, and you've got the roadway and infrastructure issues. And then again, you're not building, I don't think you can build a road needed for a subdivision within this 30-foot easement, not even close, be my guess. But again, and Cody's shaking his head, so he's kind of confirming what I'm saying here, and the property owners are. So you can ask them directly if there's any plan to subdivide. You can ask that to be a condition, an additional condition, that there are no subdivisions up there. See if, what they agree to. But I can tell you from a lot split perspective, you can't split those lots right now. So right now we have 7 parcels, and I asked the question to our planning department. 6. We have 7 parcels up there, and I asked our planning director this morning, planning manager this morning, about how many, and this goes to the comment about units. She informed me that on a parcel in rural residential, you can do 2 units per parcel. So, and again, she's not here, unfortunately, she couldn't make it. So if we need to bring her back in January to answer some more specific questions, but that's what she told me. So someone could build a home in an ADU, someone could build 2 homes, someone could build a duplex, is what she told me, on any one of those parcels. So 7 times 2, I think based on what she told me today, you're looking at 14 dwelling units. And I see him handed back and I can't answer questions. So I don't know, sorry. I can't answer your question.
I'm not asking a question, I'm helping the other council. Because you might want to tell us what the zoning is.
It's rural residential.
Right.
Yeah.
And so your zoning allows 1 unit per acre if there's paved roads, potable water, and your zoning allows 1 unit per 5 acres without. According to your information.
That was in the staff report, but conversely, they could all sell, and this becomes that 114 acre parcel for development. That also.
You mean
is
if they
possible.
combine them?
Yes, if all seven were choosing to sell. I mean, that's what was going to be one of my questions. Do we have seven owners that are all looking to develop their property? Or do we have seven owners looking to sell to a developer?
To combine. So that's a, I'm gonna turn away from the audience here because I'm gonna ask, and I'm sorry if you can't hear me, I'll repeat it. Can you just write Alex an email and ask her if the 2.5 acre limitation applies to combinations? Because that process is usually the same. It's a lot split or combination, and they may have the same. I'll see if I can get you that answer. That's a good question.
And if they limit it to 30 units, then obviously they're probably also, I'm the P and Z liaison.
Yep.
So they probably also have to sign off on releasing their Prop 207. Because they devalue their property because they can't build, completely everything that they could possibly build on rural residential. I mean, I'm just seeing a lot of potential complications.
So, yeah, we can break that down a little bit more. So what the gentleman said in back, I mean, you're talking rural residential. So what you can do with rural residential is pretty darn limited. If you have water and sewer, and I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, which they don't, it's, what is it, one per, now I'm gonna ask him the question.
Yeah, no.
Is it 1 per 5? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was in the
Yeah.
staff report.
What I'm saying is, you said your zoning was in your documentation.
Yeah,
You
it's-
said the optimal zoning there was 1 unit per acre based on paved roads and bodies of water.
That was 1 per 5.
What?
Okay, we'll get you more information, but I'll ask the question about the combinations. We can talk to the property owners about any type of condition you want to put on there. Going back to the 30 though. The 30 is really limited by the type of roads they're requesting to put in. So going beyond 30 is a different standard from what my fire department tells me. So as much as I don't want to tell you, you can never get above 30 up there with some change in the law or change in our zoning or some other change. What I've been told by our fire department is the fire apparatus access road you can use for up to 30 dwelling units. So max would be 30 unless they built secondary access under any zoning, but we can figure out the RR. So So we have for RR, the max density is 1 unit per acre with a paved road, which they'd have, and city potable water, which they don't have. So otherwise it's 1 unit per 5 acres. So if they don't have potable water, it's 1 unit per 5 acres. So you're talking, some of those parcels are 6 acres. I was told by our planning, with that 6 acre parcel, you can build 2 units on those parcels. So
Question.
can't answer questions.
Sorry. Wait for public.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have some discussions within the commission at this point. I mean, question and answers and discussion.
Sure.
But one number that sticks in my head is total acreage is 114 acres. Okay. You brought up the fact that there are potential ways of increasing the number of development parcels, I guess, on these or units. And what you just said, it could be as many as 50. If land is sold and resold and so on. My concern with the open space area is the density close to it and the access to it. There's a positive side to this, and that one of our problems with the Observatory Mesa conservation area is access to people who may not be the best conditioned people. Parking area at the edge of it. This could be helpful that way. But on the other hand, I see a number of threats. And in fact, I also am concerned, one of the major important elements of the Observatory Mesa are the canyons. It's brought out with the base document it's repeated a number of times in the easement as being, these are some of the most important aspects of the Mesa. And this goes right through some of those. So there's a balance in my mind. I bought some property. It didn't work out. We're always told, buyer beware. You did have the access to it. It's in there, it's legal. But how big that access can be, it's not granted. It's limited by the city regulations. So I'm torn, there's a positive here, but there's some negatives as far as the Observatory Mesa is concerned. So that's where I'm coming from. And my last comment would be, what are the other options for access to this property?
I'd like to follow up on that same, I have kind of the same question because I have the understanding that there are properties to the north, for want of a better word, of these 7. And I believe there's some properties that have homes on them and there's a road. Could that be used as a secondary? I mean, we're talking about it's difficult and they would need a secondary access to be able to, increase the, the density. I just wonder, like I say, there's properties to the north that connect to Hidden Hollow, to the east, I guess.
Mike, I was thinking the same thing. I actually drove it this morning. And after I was looking on Google Maps and on the parcel viewer and all those sorts of things. And those properties to the north with that Garrett, I think it's called Garrett Road, is there any sort of creative collaboration where there could be an exchange of the right of way from where it was initially granted back in 1986 to off of Garrett Road where it lines the perimeter of those properties and just goes straight down, straight south from, Garrett, a corner of Garrett Lane and Hidden Hollow and goes straight down? It would be a shorter distance to develop. It wouldn't divide the Observatory Mesa. I just wondered if any of those other more creative thinking outside the box options have been looked at.
Yeah, so we definitely talked with the property owners about that, and if the commission's up for it, answering questions like that, it may be better if Cody just wants to come up. Because one thing we were gonna do is as we were trying to set this up, like we set up, you'll be familiar with this planning and zoning, like rezoning requests, we were gonna let staff talk, you answer questions, and then let the property owners come up and if they want to give a presentation or talk about their issues. And I think, I don't know if Cody, are you gonna be the one doing that, or are you planning on doing that?
Yeah, I was gonna give a verbal description. I think you covered a lot of the issues, but
But if you're up for it, we can also just have him come sit at the table and you can just ask him questions directly. Because that's really, we did ask about that, and I'll show it on the map what you're talking about. But they had the answers. I'd rather not try to remember what he said and just let him tell you.
Yeah, may I raise a point, and that is, I'm saying necessary to have planning people here, some engineering people here, and to have a long, full discussion on this item here. Because we do have another item on the agenda that talks about the Mesa itself. They're connected. But my feeling is we could talk a long time on this, but we wouldn't get to a point where we could really say yay or nay, or we'd probably come to the point where the suggestion is we really need to have a full session on this. Like, because I'm worried about the neighbors in the county that are on, and their input. I'm worried about, well, whether the county would need to update or do something to their road. There are at least four authorities, I think, is going to be involved in this decision one way or the other. State land, the city, the county, and maybe, game and fish, for instance. So I see this as, something for a complete agenda on. I'm just throwing that out to the commission.
And I don't think that, be able to come to, you know, speaking to your point, a decision tonight. I mean, it obviously is complex and it deserves us looking at it in great detail. So from their perspective and from the commission.
That's right, I think there's a lot. Yes.
Do you want to have Cody come up and answer your question about Garrett Lane? Do you mind doing that? 'Cause I think it makes a lot of sense. And then if you want to cover anything that I didn't cover, we were going to give Cody that right or ability to do that. Just, we were trying to present it from our perspective, but wanted to get that ability to do the same. So,
Could you tell us what parcel you was, which letter? C, E.
so Cody, I have the same problem I had.
Yeah, so, you know,
You wanted to pull a chair or
let's pull a chair around so I can face these spots.
So L is the one that furthest east, the three small ones. Is that your parcel?
I'm the smaller. It's this one.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, everybody, I'm Cody Bronson. I'm a climate researcher at NAU, and we bought that 2L parcel, that one there, a few years ago in order to just build a home for our family there. And yeah, my wife can chat over here. And yeah, we've been just working with the city.
No, I gave it to you.
Yeah, thank you, Commission, for considering this item. And thank you, Kevin, for giving that. I don't know, I think you covered it, most of the issues that I wanted to discuss, but effectively we've been working with the city. But we had a pre-application meeting just over a year ago to start this conversation. And then we had gone through multiple plan iterations, had multiple meetings, just to try to thread this needle between how can we gain access to our property to, build a home while, respecting the open space and kind of minimizing our impact as much as possible on the community's open space. We have explored effectively every other access option. That was one of your questions. I'm open to ideas, and we're always open to ideas. And the engineering and the impact of going straight up off of Garrett Lane, that's a really steep hill, and so we have to do multiple switchbacks, et cetera. And so I think what we've arrived at is there's an existing easement and there's an existing road, and they align in some places, they don't align everywhere. Our goal here is we don't want to build two roads, so there's already a road. And we move the easement from where it exists to where the road is, so we don't have to do a massive cut across the hillside, including retaining walls and like the engineering, anything is possible. And the impact on the open space is severe if we try to fit a road that meets the city standards within the existing easement. And I think as Kevin mentioned, we'd love to use the road as it is. We'd be happy to, however, to meet city standards, we're going to bind to, we have to have a certain width, we have to be 20 feet wide, we have to have turn radius, slope requirements, and in order to do that, this is kind of the minimum impact that we've come up with to still be able to access and enjoy the property. And we floated all sorts of ideas in terms of, can we buy this property, can we trade for it, and any other, how can we solve this problem? This is where we've arrived at, and sort of the best proposal, as Kevin said, that we could come up with over several months of iteration. So that's why we felt prepared to bring it to you today. We're open to ideas, et cetera. I think
to get to the Garrett, so Commissioner, you were talking about this is Garrett Road, Garrett Lane. This is a privately held parcel here. I think you're correct. There is a house or two here.
There.
We talked about this. This is, and so you can see a little bit on this map, the topography here. This is a pretty steep cliff / slope. And so that's what Cody was talking about. If we try to take the road straight down here, they run into the switchbacks. In order to keep 10% slope, they'd have to basically switch back up that cliff. So it wouldn't be, they'd be all doing this on private property. First, you have to get the private property owner to agree. And then it's not as simple as just running a road right along the edge of your property, which was, I think I asked the same question in one of our early meetings, and someone pointed this out. So it's just, that's not something that would work, or it wouldn't be very easy, and you would cause a significant impacts here. There was some discussion about, what's this community right here? Linwood. There's this road here. It looks like an old road here. That was another one we talked about. It's aside from the similar issues here with this on this parcel where you have pretty steep slopes here across this cliff. This is another privately held parcel, and Linwood was not agreeable to it, I believe.
Yeah, so it's Jesse Gregory Park, and in order to develop Linwood at that basically a small lot size, they needed to have a bunch of open space to accommodate. So I think the zoning was minimum 5 acres, et cetera, similar to what was up on the top, that 114 acres. And so in exchange for keeping the development down below, they gave up that big section of parkland. And so that's undevelopable. It's not we can't plow the road through it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So to answer your question, and I appreciate Cody's comment that they're open to other creative solutions. But to answer your question, yes, we did talk about a lot of these. If maybe we missed one, maybe there's someone in this audience or on the commission that has another idea. But I do want to stress that, yeah, we tried to come up with other iterations that would even, like you said, pull us off of the Mesa altogether. And we just couldn't seem to find one from a land and engineering perspective that would work.
Yeah, and to answer your question about lot splits, I don't know what the zoning requires. I think Kevin explained that pretty well in terms of how many parcels can be up there, and how many units per parcel, et cetera. Right now there are 7. The minimum for that area would be a 5 acre parcel. However, because these are 20 acre pieces, you can't given how they were split, the smallest they could go was that 6.3 acres. And then there's limitations on what's a development and what's not, which I'm not familiar with. But that's just to answer that question maybe a little more clearly.
Yes. So the example, and I don't know, so this was state land. Well, no, this wasn't state land. I don't know.
So city.
At some point, this parcel here was split. And the reason why you see 4 is because usually when you go over 4, that's when you become a subdivision. So that's why you see it split like this. So whoever owned this 40 acre parcel at one point split it. I don't know if it ever came to the city. I think we tried to find it and we couldn't. But at some point it was split. Sometimes, unfortunately, lots get split without city involvement, which is unfortunate, but it does happen. And so, but again, going back to what I was told by our planning manager, the definition of a lot split is 2.5 acres or less. All of these are over 2.5 acres. So if Cody came in and wanted to split his parcel here 3 times and to not become a subdivision, or 4 times and not become a subdivision, he would be told that's not a lot split because your parcel is too big. Because his parcel is 6.36 acres about.
Something.
So he can't go through the lot split process. So the only other way to divide your parcel up into legal parcels that can be sold would be to subdivide. And then that's what I was talking about with the subdivision regulations. And again, I like the idea of coming back. I'm sorry, property owners, Cody, I know you guys are, they're trying to get an answer here, but I appreciate that. You guys have a lot of questions, and we can bring Alex in and she can walk through all the subdivision regulations with you. And talk about everything that would need to be done in order to subdivide one of these parcels. I'm just telling you, based on my work with our planning department and projects I've worked on, subdivision, public improvements are pretty extensive. And again, you can ask Cody, I don't know, I'll ask him, I don't think Cody's planning on subdividing.
No, staff has been very clear about the requirements of the access between, if you want to subdivide, this is not, the proposal that you're bringing us, these plans do not meet that requirement. The proposal you're bringing with us is, to access 7 or more residences, but it's not a subdivision standard. And so, none of us have any intention of subdividing. The access that we're asking for wouldn't allow us to subdivide that property.
But some of the other larger ones could be.
Well, they would need to,
Same.
they would need, I'm not sure what the access standards are for a subdivision, but it comes down to a paved surface, stormwater, et cetera. Like, I don't know what the requirements are, but they're much more, onerous than the proposal that we made.
Right, so, and going back to the fire department standards. So we were talking about the 30 units. So really how fire looks at this is, we can bring fire back to, so this is essentially, I think this is mapping the dirt road, not
That's
the
not the
easement.
dirt road, yeah.
So this is essentially the dirt road that goes back there. And it provides access to these 7 parcels. The proposal that the property owners are bringing forward is to improve that with a revised easement to provide the same thing, access to those 7 parcels. The standard they're using is that fire apparatus access road. It only allows access up to 30 dwelling units. So as I would look at this, worst case scenario sitting right here, it would be 30 dwelling units. And I think that's still very hard because I don't know how you get there unless you subdivide, which if you subdivide, you're going for more than 30. And it gets us anything above 30, you have secondary access. And so what that means is the fire department would want another road coming out of these 7 parcels to access some other area in case there was a fire of some kind. So if there was a fire on the Mesa and you had 100 homes back here, you'd have to have another road coming out the other side, coming out another direction. And as Cody just told you, this parcel here is parkland, right? And this is state land. And I don't know who owns this.
Yes.
Oh, this is us. And they don't have an easement over it. So I don't want to say anything's impossible, but if the property owners were designing something that needed secondary access, first, they don't have a second easement that I'm aware of. So I don't know how they would get the legal rights. I doubt the city would want to give them to them. Definitely not across either one of our parcels up there that are under the easement, nor maybe we couldn't. So again, I think worst case scenario, I think that 30 is a pretty darn good number. And again, that's worst case scenario. I don't know how you divide enough to be able to do that even based on what my planning manager said. I think 14 is the number I had in my head, which is 2 dwelling units on each parcel. But maybe a little bit more, but you're talking maybe 14, 20 dwelling units. But definitely at this point, I don't see any way to get over 30 because I don't see how they get secondary access.
Yeah.
Is that a good way?
I think that's a clear way of explaining it. There's no way for secondary access. The primary access is what we're hoping for, and it's been a big struggle. So,
Do you have questions?
Not a question, just a comment. Our job is to decide whether doing this is a benefit or not a benefit for the open space area, which is under this conservation easement. That's our decision to make. It seems like there's a lot of other decision makers involved in this. And those decision makers may require other things. And that may impact whether we think it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think we're really, from the open space point of view, I know you spent a lot of time with the city. But from the open space point of view, I think there's a lot more that has to be unraveled. I'm still concerned about what the Hidden Hollow neighborhood would say about this. I'd like to know what the county might say. I didn't know you. So that's where I am in that. And I'm always open to more information and more discussion. But at this point, I can't take another step.
Well, I think we've covered what we wanted to cover. So I think at this point, it sounds like, looks like you have another question.
I just have a question for Cody.
Yeah.
Cody, you said you use the road now to access that area.
Yes,
Is it drivable by four-wheel drive? Or
Yes.
Regular vehicle?
four-wheel drive, there's one spot you need four-wheel drive effectively. You could spin out and maybe get up it, but that section where we propose to deviate it, that steep section is four low and truck.
What are the estimated costs for the engineering?
What's that?
What are the estimated costs for the engineering improvements?
For the actual putting in the road?
Yeah.
We had some estimates early on, but we haven't on the most recent iteration. It was 200,000, I think, for the road work, depending on the surface, et cetera.
Is the question for you, is the requirements for the fire, is that based on a standard fire apparatus? So in other words, if the cost of the engineering were exchanged for fire apparatus that could navigate that road, would those standards still apply?
The standards come from the fire code. So it's in the fire code, which is adopted by us and adopted by the state. I don't think there's any way to get around that slope requirement. Regardless of, I see where you're going, if a certain type of vehicle could get there on this type of dirt road, I think because of the slope, and you have to expect mud and rain and snow. I think we're stuck with this standard. I think they were pretty adamant. This is the best fire could do. Because we did talk to fire about that, other ways to limit the standard. We talked about a driveway standard, sorry, and that's the language I used in your staff summary. But the problem with the driveway standard is you can only have a driveway that access parcels, 5 units. So since we have 7 parcels, that really didn't make a lot of sense. Also with the driveway standard, you have to have bump outs. A driveway is only 12 feet wide. So the idea is I think every 30 feet, they have a bump out. So if you need to pass, and so when we're talking with our fire inspector, who's been helping us with this, he was really pointing out that once you build those bump outs, you pretty much have the same impact. And from his perspective, it didn't make sense to build a driveway that could only access 5 dwelling units when you have 7 parcels. And also, once you end up doing it, you pretty much have the same impact. So you might as well just do the fire apparatus access road. And that's what he would prefer.
I don't know, this might be more for, maybe for Robert or for us on the commission, but from a conservation point of view for the open space on Observatory Mesa and the impact to wildlife habitat, which was mentioned in the staff report. Is there going to be, obviously there's going to be a lot of disruption with not only the construction of the road itself, but the construction of the homes over time, and then traffic over time to access those 30 homes or 14 homes, whatever it ends up being, indefinitely. Is there some sort of environmental impact that needs to be done as far as like identifying whether there is a post-fledging area for the goshawk and things like that? Where does that fall into this consideration for us? And maybe that's something that you addressed, Robert.
I don't know if I can address the question in totality, but yeah, there would be some concerns with increased traffic for wildlife. You mentioned the goshawk habitat that has been identified in that section. That's one of the wildlife that lives in that area. For construction of trails and that sort of thing, or homes, there can be timing to work around, like fledging and nesting time periods. So that could be something that could be considered. But I think Arizona State Parks, they would also have to review this request. And they would likely have.
So that would probably come under their purview more so than ours. Okay.
Well, both.
Yeah.
Both. Okay.
So to kind of add on to what Robert said, what I have on the screen here is the original easement, the BLE easement. Was this in the packet?
Yes.
Okay. So one thing and if you haven't reviewed it, whether you're a member of the public or member of the commission, the easement as it currently stands has pretty significant conditions in it. For example, here, number 4, identifying the amount of flora that will be cut, removed, or destroyed, and there's all type of requirements for rehabilitation. And why I pulled this up is, I'm not gonna go through every one, but I believe in here, there's a separate section on environmental considerations. There you go, environmental indemnity. So maybe that's not really where you were going, but I want to point out that if you haven't looked at that easement, look at it. It has some pretty strict conditions. But again, as I mentioned before, the property owners have been pretty reasonable in agreeing to other types of conditions. And so if the commission ultimately ends up, I'm not asking you to do it today, but next meeting, if you're thinking of some other conditions, you talked about lot splits and other things. I talked to Cody about that a little bit. I think Cody had some questions about the lot split requirements that he may just be learning about today. So I don't know if his position changed, but you can ask to put other conditions in about splitting, subdividing, that based on what the property owners have learned today, and maybe want to do their own research. It may just make sense because you really can't do a lot up there anyway. So keep that in mind if you have some of these other questions about construction and impacts. If you have ideas about conditioning something, I think the property owners have been really reasonable in responding to those.
Well, and property owners, we've only heard from one.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's in the minds of the others.
Yeah.
But even if it's in their minds, from my point of view, if we move ahead, where we move ahead, everything has to be really defined well and no loopholes and all.
That's why I'm here.
But going back to my first statement, I think we need to discuss and think about the worst possible scenario in this, providing this access with the requirements that the city wants. And how that might be positive for the open space on the observatory method, where it might be negative. And that's the thing that I need to balance in my head. And I'm not concerned about the road in terms of if it will be done in a way that it's as careful as possible. It's the road itself, once it's in, at the size that it needs to be, begins to give me some worries.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. We need to bring Alex in, our planning manager. We'll bring in the fire department. We'll bring in Chris, and he can answer some of these questions. I think I've answered them accurately. I haven't been bumped by Robert, but they can answer some of your more detailed questions. So yeah, and when it comes to the conditions and the drafting, yeah, I was joking, but yeah, that's essentially another reason why I'm in the room. So when we draft, if there's an easement that is ultimately revised, that's what I'll be working on. And any conditions, we'll make sure they're pretty clear and nailed down. And again, the conditions, whatever the property has agreed to as well. And then going to process, I really appreciate the time Open Space Commission is putting into this. And I heard you say earlier, there's gonna be other people involved. And yeah, definitely the council, I mean, the council ultimately makes the decision here. If anyone in the public who maybe didn't read the staff summary, to the commission, you're giving a recommendation and council's going to want a well thought out recommendation. So don't take my comment as saying you shouldn't care too much about this. I think they want your input. They want your strong recommendation. So take the time you need. But ultimately, at the end of the day, council's going to be the group that decides whether or not to amend the easement, just so everybody is aware of that process. So this will be here for as long as it needs to be to get a recommendation from the council. And then it will be in front of another public body, city council, to discuss the same thing.
Have we kind of,
I think
as far as the,
the presentations are good. Questions?
and I think as a council, or as a commission, we know, we have still lots of questions, but there's a lot of people from the public that have come as well. So I think if it's,
It's your meetings.
in that case, anybody from the public wants to speak on the subject, please, for time's sake, keep it brief.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for discussing this today.
Come up.
Well, please.
Where do you usually put them, up in front?
Yeah, you can use that.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mike. I know there's a lot on the agenda today, so I'll try to be quick. I just wanted to highlight that from an open space perspective, I think the question of the surface of the road is pretty important. I know there was discussion of, I wasn't quite clear on what exactly was being proposed, but it sounded like some form of a paved road. And so I think that question in terms of whether it alters the baseline conditions of the natural area, permanently alters the character of the natural area should be considered. As folks have mentioned, Hidden Hollow Road, a county road adjacent to it, has been engineered in ways presumably that allow for fire access. So I just wanted to highlight that point and the importance of considering whether, even if the road was improved, the easement was granted, the importance of the question of surface, and especially in the context of noise from a paved road versus a dirt road, in light of the goshawk information presented in the packet and other well-documented research on noise impacts on. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Audience?
Well, my name is Rick Lopez, and I'm here on behalf of the Northern Arizona Association of Realtors. The Northern Arizona Association of Realtors wish to express our full support for the Observatory Mesa Residential Area Driveway Access and Mitigation Plan, which outlines the necessary steps for the construction of driveways on 7 parcels totaling 114 acres. We believe this plan is essential for both the landowners and our community, as it strives to balance the need for property access with the preservation of our valuable natural resources. The proposed plan demonstrates a thoughtful and considered approach to minimize the impact on the Observatory Mesa natural area while meeting the city's fire access standards. The efforts to realign the easement with the existing road and address slope requirements are commendable, showcasing a commitment to both environmental conservation and public safety. We appreciate the comprehensive considerations given to construction impacts, stormwater management, and fire apparatus access. The commitment to restoration measures, including decompacting construction zones and reseeding of native plant species, reflects a responsible approach to mitigating environmental impacts. Furthermore, the plan's acknowledgement of the need for collaboration and potential concessions in the city demonstrates a willingness to work harmoniously to achieve a solution that benefits all involved. Thank you very much.
My name is Mike Berg. I want to thank you for inviting us to this meeting. I'm a local contractor here in Flagstaff for going on 45 years. I live in the Hollow area. And I really appreciate getting this notification of this amendment. And I do understand property owners have a right to have access to their property, construction, the surrounding area. But there's a lot of residents in this room that are impacted by what is being proposed on this revision of the amendment. First of all, and you've already mentioned that, let's stop calling it a driveway. It's not a driveway. It's a massive road construction, and it is rerouting this easement as you've shown, but this is not net zero impact to the natural area. This is a and I'm surprised you haven't walked it. You're commenting. I'm surprised you haven't walked this road. We ride there, bike there, and walk that area. And there's a lot to be said for just the old road the way it is. And as a builder, there's a lot to be said for building off grid. So I'm for the improvements, the bike path, trails, and the conservation area easement itself, but I'm wholly against this roadway change. No one has mentioned the impact of, let's say, 30 parcels with 3 drivers per parcel and all that traffic coming down this roadway to a dirt road hitting a hollow road. And no one has mentioned the sound and the cost of what this construction would be for residents that live in the area. It's a huge, huge construction project. Someone even mentioned a bridge. This is not the area for that kind of construction. Public safety, foot traffic, jogging, bicyclists, construction dust. All that construction has to go through Hidden Hollow Road. All that construction has to meet Highway 180. I left my house at 10 minutes after 3. I barely walked in at 4 o'clock because snowball skiers were getting off the hill, coming on 180. Secrets was letting out of school. And so it was a long trek just to get here. So I'd like to hear more research on how this is impacting many more neighbors and the few property owners that are here. And what is the plan for beyond this easement? We have to work with the county and the city and the state right of way. Are you gonna put a traffic control device on 180 and Hidden Hollow Road? Because as it is right now, we have to wait till we have a clear path to enter Hidden Hollow. We have, what, 3,000 skiers. This is 40% of all the traffic that goes to the Grand Canyon National Park is on 180. So you're looking at the big picture with this map and the topo, which is a good job in the drawing, but it drastically affects a lot of folks. And I would like to, I see that this massively violates the deed of this conservation easement. And I strongly urge the Open Space Commission not to recommend this proposed amendment and further study what can be done for alternative.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me come up here and talk. My name is Flagstaff. I'm one of the smaller parcel owners up there. To answer your question from earlier, my intention is not to ever agree to any subdivision. My intention is to build forever homes for my husband and I. We have worked, Cody has spent hours and hours working with engineering over the last year to come up with a plan that works for everyone. We don't want to disturb that area. That's why we bought up there. Unfortunately, the area was annexed into the city at some point, so we're being held to city requirements, which we don't want to be held to. We also, want to conserve that area. We also asked the question, why are we being held to standards when there is that county dirt road? But we're being held to city standards, and unfortunately, fire code is not something that can be broken. All we are asking is that you allow us to develop our property and build our homes the same way all of you guys did. And that's what we're asking of the Open Space Commission. We want to keep it open, and it's not going to be a public access. As Kevin said, we have agreed to make it a private roadway that is just going to be our access for vehicular while still allowing bicycle foot traffic. So please keep that in mind when you guys make a decision.
Which parcel are you?
Or 2J.
J. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Cooney. I have nothing prepared, but I am also a Hidden Hollow resident, and we live there for a reason. We're a lot bit concerned about the potential increase in traffic accessing Hidden Hollow Road and potential for light pollution, which can be big in that area, and noise pollution. Not to mention the environmental impact and the impact on wildlife that roam the area. Again, we live there for a reason, and the reason is not to become a developer or a development like that. And I would be interested to know if any or how many of the owners are an investment company looking to build or produce more rental income properties or rental vacation properties, that's a huge impact. That we put up with that all the time out there. There are a few that do that, and it's tremendous. The noise, the trash on Hidden Hollow Road, and they treat it like some sort of recreational area, and the lights and the noise is ridiculous. And potential of 30 more units up in the area is concerning. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, commission members, Charlie Silver. I have a couple of questions, and this is the only way I know how to ask them. So anyway, I think you maybe addressed it a little bit, but if you could reiterate, who is responsible financially for this driveway and the maintenance of the road too? I understand it'll be a private road, so does that translate to what I think it does? I'd like to hear an answer to that question. Secondly, if this road widening happens, would this essentially release the city from maybe any future improvements to this right of way that might be asked for? That's my second question. You can ponder. Thank you.
Can answer at least the first,
Good.
if the commission wants me to.
Go ahead.
So, sorry, and I should have brought it up in the conditions. We definitely talked about this being a private roadway that would be maintained by the property owners. That's something the property owners have agreed to in, I guess, draft form, that if we did amend an easement, we talked about them requiring them to form some sort of HOA, that some sort of legal entity that we would be able to contract with or create an agreement with, for those property owners to be responsible for maintaining the road, any erosion issues, as well as snow plow and plowing the road and things along those lines. And building the road is definitely their cost. And sorry, Charlie, I didn't understand where you're going with your second question.
The city provides improvements to this easement that has been inherited, essentially, that's been grandfathered in. Are there possibilities for future improvements for other property owners to come to the commission as well and ask for widening the road even further for more properties, for example?
Yeah, I think, can you amend an easement a second time? Sure. I think, again, we're always dealing with the conservation easement, and again, state parks has to approve this. There's only so much area up there we are allowed to disturb under the conservation easement, is it 20 acres? So and Robert's very concerned about that, because there's other trails and other things that may be built up there that will take up some of that 20 acres. So yes, could it be amended again? Sure. Again, I won't say it won't ever be amended again, but I think this is a little bit of a different situation. And as it was presented from the property, and as we knew it from day one, when we purchased the property, there is an easement up there right now that allows these property owners to build a road. They have the right to do that. If they were able to walk in and construct a road, and as Cody put it, I'm not going to tell you it's impossible from an engineering perspective. I'm not an engineer. We'll bring an engineer next time. I think their engineer is he was very nice to work with. He answered some good questions we had. Could they build a road in this easement as it stands right now? Theoretically, probably yes, but as we put it, you want to talk about a lot of disturbance in that area where they go outside, that's where you'd see a ton of it. You'd see retaining walls, you'd see a lot of cut into that, a lot of grading. So that is one thing they're trying to avoid in doing this. But going back to your question, we're dealing with a right that these property owners have. So the request is to tweak that right. They're not looking to come in and say, we have the right to we have a 30-foot wide easement to build a road back to our parcels. The second easement, the second request, maybe we want to go 60-foot wide to construct 1,000 homes back there. They're not even close to that, right? And I doubt so. With the conservation easement in mind, knowing our open space commission's view on this and our council's view on this, can you amend it a second time? Yeah. Would it be amended a second time? That's a long shot.
But theoretically, you get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 amendments if somebody would want to try.
Sure, you can always make the request, but I think, again, I just go back to the fact that, and again, we're not up here to I'm not lobbying on the property owner's behalf. I think the property owners will tell you that's furthest from where I'm at. Nor is Robert, obviously, but we want to be really fair to the discussion. And I think to be fair, you have to understand that they have a certain right to build a road back there. So from your, I appreciate the perspective of open space and the perspective the commission, the council will have when they get this in front of them. And that's why I keep saying, you know, you have willing property owners here who understand they're making a request. They have a right, but they're making a request. And they're willing to listen to conditions and other things that the community or the commission or the council will ultimately want to ask them to condition. And so be open to those types of things, but always remember that there is an underlying right there.
I just wanted, I have to leave to go get the other two kids, but I just wanted to add to what Alexis said, that at our core, we are conservationists. That's why we paid to buy the land up there. And we did not understand when we bought that the access road, like we're fine with dirt roads and we're happy off grid. And that's what we envisioned. And we didn't really understand that no building could happen until the road was modified. But we really are people like the rest of you in Hidden Hollow, and we want to be there for the same reasons as you. And if you want to try and get a traffic thing built at that intersection, we're also the kind of people who are willing to go work with the city and make, you know, like collaborate and try and find a solution, because we're going to be there with you. Like, we want to be on the same team. We don't want to like muck up your life. We actually just want to join. So we're younger, we're, you know, just starting out, but we envy the life that you have out there and we want to be part of it. And unfortunately, the road is the way that that happens. And I wish it wasn't. And with that, I'm going to go get the other kids.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dave Cheney, live on Hidden Hollow Road. And my request for the commission, first of all, thank you, Commission, for allowing all of us to come and speak tonight, is to not vote on this tonight, which I believe we're safe in saying that we're not going to do that. I think there has to be a lot more work that has to be done. Cody, totally appreciate you and everyone else. You guys do have a right to access. But I appreciate that you said, let's look at all the options. My piece is particularly affected by this because the easement cuts right through my property. I'd like to look at the options. I've known about this for 4 days now. So I need a little time to work and think and understand, Cody, what the other options could possibly be. But I understand you're right. And I understand the work that the commission has done. But this, just like you've heard from everyone else, this has a huge impact, not just on the Observatory area, but the Hidden Hollow neighborhood as well. So that's my only ask is, let's just be patient, let's do this correctly, and let's not vote on this evening. Okay.
Hi, my name is Marcus Hoffman. I'm a resident in Linwood Heights. So my property, which is jointly owned by all of us in Linwood Heights, is abutting these private properties. So we're neighbors. So a few questions here that I also have for the council to consider, not necessarily to be answered right now, is really, again, what is the hardness of the road? Is this considered a paved road from a development perspective, a subdivision perspective, or is it a dirt road, primitive improved dirt road? That's kind of an oxymoron, I realize. So that's one question I have. Perhaps my biggest question is, and it hasn't been raised tonight, is would this in any way encumber the city to provide water and sewer services to these parcels, which would have a concomitant huge impact on the infrastructure of the city, costs, et cetera? for maintenance of that. And the reason I asked for that is one of the landowners came to the Linwood Heights Homeowners Association, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, and asked us to provide a utilities easement through our property up to these properties up there, which we kindly and vociferously declined. I have no intention of actually ever granting. I can say as one landowner there. So what is the city's commitment or lack to providing sewer and water to this section, these sections of land? The other is back to the private and public access here. I actually commend on one hand that it would be gated private if it was approved. But it seems like the deed is for public access. So what is the balance between public and private use of this right of way should it be developed? And I think that's really unclear. And to the Hidden Hollow issue, I know that the Greater Observatory Mesa planning effort has planned for an access point, I think, at the head of this road. What are the implications to the Hidden Hollow neighborhood, parking, numbers of people, roadway access, things like that? I think that's also very unresolved, and that's, I know, the next item of discussion tonight. I guess that's it for now. So I really appreciate the commission considering this so thoroughly and the city time, and thanks for taking the comments.
You want us to address the service?
You can answer it, yes.
Yes, so it's a ABC, which is basically a gravel road. It's an aggregate. It's a dirt road. It's a technical term for a dirt road, but basically the surface is gravel, and the depth and compaction of that surface are required by, the geotechnical engineers will specify what that depth and surface is. It's not a paved road, it's a dirt road for, for my purposes, it's a dirt road.
I just add, the observatory is required to have a second access built in the process of building the new visitors building. And that's there now. So if somebody would want like an example of it, you can go up and you can't miss it. But it's of the same dimensions that we're requiring, and the 20,000 gross weight, and all the rest of it.
Go ahead. I think I'm Jack Moody. I live off of Hidden Hollow Road. The one thing I think that's really important for everybody to understand is once that right of way gets improved, even though you're saying it's only for 30 homes max, which actually would put 100% more capacity onto Hidden Hollow Road than exists right now. So I think the county would really have to be involved in that discussion. But once that right of way becomes more developed, even the new landowners need to understand that there's a big parcel of state land up there, and state land's up for sale. So if you buy a piece of state land, you have to buy a big piece of state land. And if there's an existing right of way, you have enough attorneys and you have the strength to turn around and get things accomplished. So, and the city owns more property up there too. So opening that up will open up a lot of other things that are going to come up against the county. It might not be in this generation, but it might be in our children's generation. And the other thing that I think is funny is when we talk about private roads and we're talking about public roads, I happen to live on a private driveway in Hidden Hollow. And I cannot tell you how many times the public have come onto my property and started to set up camp, build snowmobile paths. So when you're talking about an area that you really want to keep as a natural area, You need to realize that once a road, a good road, is put in there, you're gonna have a tremendous amount of traffic. Whether you call it public or private, people know how to open gates. And they will come in, and they'll come in with their four-wheelers and their quads and their side-by-sides, and they'll leave their trash, and there'll be a lot to deal with. And as long as the city's willing to police all of that and keep it all straightened out, it's a big job. Because Hidden Hollow right now, everybody that lives up there knows that the public is up there constantly. So you have a private road or not.
Please, let him finish his comments.
So that's all I wanted to bring up. Everybody's already brought up a lot of really good points. And I think that Hidden Hollow Road being put that much more pressure on it is going to need some improvement in that area because it can't handle it. Thank you.
Just respond to it. So, with respect to access, we have talked to the property owners about potentially putting a gate on that road. That they would obviously have the ability to open and close. We were in preliminary discussions, I'll call it. Cody talked with his group about it. There were some concerns on their end about maintenance of the gate and things regarding with respect to snow plowing and things along those lines. But again, going back to what I keep saying about conditions, if that is a concern, that's a way you can alleviate it, is to gate it. I believe the secondary access for the observatory is gated. It's common. It's not uncommon, is what I want to say there, where we have these gates that can control access only for the property owners and public safety. Public safety gets access as well, obviously. So something to think about with respect to that one.
Anyone else in the public that wants to make a comment on this item?
Just real quick.
Who unlocks that gate if there's a fire?
I think fire has control over it. I don't get a better answer to that. My understanding is that fire has the ability to open and close all of those. And obviously the property owners would have access.
Not spots key that.
We have a firefighter here.
I live on West Aspen, and I have witnessed over my 30-some years living on West Aspen, increase of use of Thorpe Park puts a big burden on neighborhoods. So I'm disturbed that the city didn't reach out to Hidden Hollow from the very beginning. And I think they really need to address how the increase in use will be handled, because you will get a lot of people working there, and they will go around the gates. And they won't be respectful because they don't feel like they're members of the community. And we know this because we live with it once a year. Because we live by Thorpe Park. So I would just really want the staff to really work with this neighborhood and make sure they're comfortable with what's going to land at their doorstep. Because it's going to not be easier, it's just going to get harder.
Another hand over here.
Yeah, I just, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the meeting, but I just wonder what assessment has been done of the impacts on wildlife in that, the road construction and the increased access. Because my understanding is the city does not have a biologist or ecologist on staff, and I believe I've been told by someone who knows that you don't have good maps of where wildlife corridors are. There's a big movement corridor between the peaks and to lower elevations through that whole area. So what assessments have you done of the increased disturbance to, really potentially important wildlife migration corridor? Has anything been done? Because if not, it really needs to be.
Just for the record, can you give us your name?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Dr. Diane Hope, yeah.
Okay, thank you. For your comment. Anyone else before we wrap this part of the agenda up?
Can you check online? Make sure you know.
Is there anyone online that has a question? Can't see the hand. I don't see a hand up.
Sure, there are no hands and I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
All right. And I guess we,
Very quickly, I'm Paul Delaney. And Mike Burr said everything that I could say better than I can, so I'm not gonna repeat myself other than say he was right.
all right, well, then I guess we'll wrap this up. For me, this is a complicated issue. I have concerns of my own, that I need to come to terms with to make a decision. I don't want to speak for, the other commissioners, but, if this item is of such importance to Observatory Mesa and to our responsibility commissioners to take more time to vet this properly and also to allow more input, from the community as well. So, and then the lawyer.
That's probably online. So, and I just want to, probably jumping in over Robert here, but just to clarify for the people listening, for the people in the community and in the audience, it sounds like the commission obviously isn't making a recommendation tonight. So Robert will bring this back to a future meeting. But it sounds like there has been some comments about outreach to some other neighborhoods, possibly getting Hidden Hollow residents involved in some of the meetings with at least city staff, possibly with some of the property owners to talk about that. So we'll do that on the staff side and then put this on a future agenda item. We'll see about January with the holidays. That may be difficult, but we'll see what happens. Does that sound like a decent summary?
Yes, and if I can just add one point to that, if you didn't sign in on the way and you'd like us to email you of notification, if you have someone else that would like to receive emails, please let us know. My email is on the agenda, but it's robert.wallace@flagstaff.ac.gov, and you can email me. And we'll be sure to get the word out when the next meeting is scheduled.
All right. With this item.
Okay, well, then, like, side, I think the time we talked about it too. And then, information.
Lots of items. All right. I'll have a.
Not thought yet, Pierce? Voices out here. Thank you.
We have the option of continuing with this. I Mesa, so desire.
Stations outside this room so we can continue the meeting.
So as a commission, we can make the decision to continue going past the 6 o'clock. Take pick up the Observatory Mesa item up, or we can push it to another meeting. It's entirely up to the commission.
Fine with conditions.
Fine, yeah. Everybody good with continuing? No.
Meeting continuing tonight.
7 minutes.
Yes, yes,
All right.
continuing tonight. I'm fine with continuing,
Okay.
and whatever the conditions.
All right.
Okay, I am not, I do have some other commitments that I need to make.
Still being formed.
I can go for a while, but not an undefined amount of.
Well, the Aquaplex closes at 8 o'clock. We need to be out here by then,
Yeah, and we can continue our meeting as long as we have a forum.
as long as you have corn.
So stay as long as you can, but ready to go. So, item B, Observatory Mesa Trail Plan, kind of continuing the conversation in some respect. Robert, you have anything you
Yeah, I can introduce the topic. So over the past few months, the commission has reviewed the trail plan and completed a site visit up through Railroad Springs. And with your support, we've incorporated some changes into the draft map. And I think we're getting close to producing a final draft. And I think our next step is to revisit any topics that the commission would like to provide specific recommendations on. So there are, we can start whichever topic you'd like. So that's my quick and dirty introduction.
start at the top?
I could, so the topics that we've kind of been discussing, I can go through those really quick. We've been talking about balancing recreation with restoration, so maintaining the natural character and scenic value of the preserve. Balancing recreation and restoration, so as far as protecting wildlife values, we've been talking about parking and access, providing sufficient number of trails for use, balancing road adoption and new trail development has been a topic, providing educational zones, providing adequate signage, adequate or an appropriate mountain bike alignments, providing mountain bike mountain bike trail features of varying difficulties, trail decommissioning, trail adoption. There's a miscellaneous category that speaks to wildfire, law enforcement, winter recreation, safe pedestrian crossings, and infrastructure costs. Single-use trails versus multi-use, directional trails, adaptive mountain biking, and e-bikes. Those are the kind of big topics that we've been discussing up to this point. So I'll leave it with that, and if there are specific topics that the commission wants to provide recommendations on, that'd be great. I think what we're kind of looking for at this point are specific recommendations for updating the current draft of the plan so we can get that ready for the next wave of public release.
Was there anything that came out of the walk? I wasn't able to attend the walk in October that became an obvious direction to answer any of those concerns.
We had some good discussions, and commissioners, please feel free to jump in here and provide your input. But I felt like on a number of these topics, we were in line with the draft as it is current.
The draft as it is.
That is, it is current on a number of these topics. I don't think that all of these topics are resolved.
Since there's a number of people here, I'd like to share how I'm trying to make a decision on all of these issues, that's including multi-use trails, directional trails, e-bikes, etc. And I have to go back to what are the legalities, what are our responsibilities. And so I'll read what describes where I'm coming from. According to the conservation easement, that is designates the use of this land and its limitations. Its purpose, its main purpose is to preserve the ecological value of this land. The following is mentioned in that conservation easement as being particularly important: elevations, crevice drainages, and sloping terrain. Conservation easement also refers to the application for the purchase of this land that contains other conservation elements, and that's what's called the base data. It's been referred to a number of times. That is the perspective I believe has sometimes been lost in this conversation. And not a matter of fault or anything. It's just been lost in the conversation, even way back several years ago when the Flagstaff Trail Initiative was being discussed. However, I have a broken collarbone, signifies that I ride mountain bikes or used to. I'm a runner. I'm an open space person. I'm a recreation person. All of those. But the perspective I have to take here is the legal intent. And I believe that legal intent written in the easement and in the base data will serve the most people in the longest time. So that's where I'm coming from. And I can go right down the list just to be prompted. I'm always open for discussion. I'm always open for counterpoints. But I support just multi-use trails in that area, on that area, because it serves the most people and will serve the most people in the long run. I do not support directional trails because I think for a park next to the city like us, there can be dangers involved. There can be dangers. There are some directional trails in the U.S. Forest Service land that we all know about. So it's not limiting it, Flagstaff people or any people, by not having directional trails on Observatory Mesa. I think the balance between recreation must legally fall on the side of conservation easement. There's wiggle room all over the place there, but that's where I feel we have to refer to. And a balance is necessary, and I think we are approaching that with a few exceptions in the plan that we have. And I would bring up the exceptions that I'm concerned about. And as far as e-bikes are concerned, I'm torn. E-bikes, because it's hard to access the Mesa the way it is now, unless you're in pretty good condition. And it's very hard to access the middle areas of the Mesa unless you're very good condition, because you have to climb a hill somewhere. And most of the time you have to go several miles before you can get there, a mile to several miles. So e-bikes, particularly the pedal assisted e-bikes, would provide access to some of these folks that could not necessarily do it otherwise. So that's one side of my thinking. As an example of the other side of my thinking happened just twice in the last week and a half. I happened to be working on some property that is adjacent to Section 17. And some kind of a motorized e-bike, I don't know what you would call it, went cruising the road there so fast. And I yelled, "Hey, this is private property." He was out of sight. And 3-4 days later, same guy, zipping through there, faster than I think regular bikes could go. So that immediately said to me, there's no way we're going to be able to monitor use of e-bikes up there. especially if they're that tight. So that's a concern. And that's balanced with this idea of access. And an example of that access happened just this morning. It was kind of amusing. I was coming down the Mars Hill Trail. And coming up the trail was a older fella. Well, I shouldn't say that, because I'm older than everybody else, but he had gray hair. And he wasn't pedaling, so it was a motorized bike, but it wasn't this fast time. He was pulling a trailer, and in that trailer was his dog. And I thought that was pretty cool. And so from that side of the point, I have no problems with it. But I have to come down at this point until we find more information, see how we can develop a group that will monitor up there, because the police aren't going to do it. We have a whole support system for that area. I think that at this point, we should not allow e-bikes up there. So those are a synopsis of what I've been thinking. And as I say, I'm always open to discussion, and I want to reiterate in the discussion, I'll always go back to the easement.
I'd like to just add a little bit. I actually agree with you on all the items that you brought up. But I'd like to also add, I have a concern about the mountain bike alignments. There's currently, yes, there's one trail up there for mountain bikes, and plan calls for 2 more. And I'm not sure that I'm on board with, providing that, with that much trail mileage or whatever for the mountain bikes.
You mean single use trail?
Well, just mountain bikes in general. The plan had added 2 new trails for mountain bikes. And there was the question about whether you improve them and create, features on those trails. And to me, I don't think that is compatible with the conservation, the experience of hiking and walking. And so I have a concern about the mountain bike aspect. You have places now where mountain biking is very popular that I'd be afraid to walk on any of those trails. It's just a matter of time. So that particular topic in the plan concerns me. I just wanted to bring that up.
Guess if we'll go down the line, I'm in agreement here too. And in the beginning, I really tried to concentrate on, can we make everybody a little bit happy? And it just, the deeper we got into it, the more convoluted it became. And my issue has always been e-bikes. And I know that wasn't really the topic of conversation that we started with, because it was talking about creating trails. But that really is the defining factor for me. And because of the speed and the motorized ability, and whether motorized is allowed up there on an open space property in a national forest, I think that's a really dangerous line to potentially cross. I've been, I'm a pedestrian when I'm up in the forest or in any of these areas. And I, have been, nearly run over by fast moving mountain bikes, both e-bikes and even regular bikes going downhill. So I think for the issue of safety, that we should have directional. I would rather see a mountain bike coming at me than coming up behind me. So I don't think the directional is, single direction helps a pedestrian. And it's still, the more and more that we have dug into this original conservation easement, not only discussion of this, but now with this discussion of earlier this evening, it really all comes down to the preservation intention for which the property was purchased. by the city. And I think it's important to preserve that from an ecological standpoint, conservation, peace and quiet usage for everyone, because it will become a mountain biking destination soon enough. And then the pedestrians are not going to feel comfortable up there. And that's not what we want out of a piece of property that's owned by the city and under the purview of open spaces. So as I look at the trail plan, you know, sometimes I think it's now still a little too much. And I'm not in favor of the mountain biking features or the one directional. I am in favor of the multi-use on all trails. And I think we need to go back to those original intentions, that it be welcoming to all.
I'm in respectful disagreement with my colleagues here on a couple of different issues. I'll start with what I'm in agreement on. Number one is e-bikes. I agree that those are, it's a slippery slope there because, as you know, there's several classes of e-bikes. And I think we're in danger of, getting to a place where people are towing loads up, hills on bikes that were clearly meant to self-propel. And I think it's also important to be at least consistent with our partners in that area, like the Forest Service and their regulations, because I think that causes confusion if you're jumping from landowner to landowner and you have to change the way you do business. As far as the mountain biking, I'm in support of it. I'm in support of single-use trails. I understand your concerns with safety. I'd like to see research and data around that. I understand that's an opinion. I've seen no data that suggests multi-use or multi-directional trails or single-directional trails are more dangerous than not. Matter of fact, I've seen the opposite, that directional trails are more safe because they reduce the closure rates of two different groups of people. But I'm not an expert at that, so I'd love for our trail consultant or somebody else to actually give us some data that suggests that we can make a decision on. The reason I support the mountain bike stuff is because, as we've seen, there's a ton of social trails up there already. People are going to go up there, and there's no enforcement mechanism really that anybody's taking up there to make sure that the rules we set in place are actually followed. So my concern is that as soon as we ban them, people are going to go right back to doing it and going to build social trails that we then have zero control or oversight of, none, zero. So I'd rather have a single-use trail that was limited to mountain bike use that hikers stayed away from, that allowed people to have the features they're looking for, rather than folks go up there and as soon as everything quiets down, go build their social trails once again in the area. Because I'm pretty sure that would happen. It's happened in just about every land area I've gone to and ridden and hiked on. So to me, it's kind of the devil we know and we can manage, rather than saying you can't do this, no enforcement mechanism, then we have social trails all over the place again. So that's kind of my take on the single use and the mountain biking aspect of this. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm the only one that hasn't spoken up. I'll do that now. Very compelling arguments. Also, the arguments that, or the comments that came in from the public that were distributed, I also found very compelling in terms of their people's views of the use of the area. The e-bikes, we talked about that last time. It's either, I'm pretty sure it's either we let all of them or none. Because the different gradations, the different categories, no one's going to be able to keep that straight. And so I'm in favor of not. So painful. I'm agreeing that e-bikes should not be banned, at least for the time being, this iteration of the plan.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, could you clarify, did you say that you're in favor that they are allowed?
No,
or
that they are not
allowed.
No.
Thank you.
Sorry,
I'm sorry for the interruption.
I said it in a very convoluted fashion. I apologize for that. So I don't believe we should allow e-bikes up on the area. I think it just causes too much confusion, and I think they'll make it even harder to manage up there. As for the mountain bikes, the trade-off here for me is that the conservation aspect of the steep slopes being so important ecologically, and of course that's where folks want the mountain bike trails.
The other side, of course, is that the social trails, and anyone who's hiked all around Flagstaff knows that there's a trail, and then there's this trail, and there's that trail, and this trail, and all over the place. And if there was some way to focus the use of the trails on one or two specific areas that could be more easily maintained and reduce the overall negative impacts, is better than, I think it's better than having a large number of unregulated trails. In my perfect world, we wouldn't have any mountain bike trails up there, but my perfect world does not exist yet.
I'd like to, Commissioner Applin, discuss the directional trails. Yeah, I'd like more information on it, whether it's a hazard or not. My, your thought that by having a directional trail releases the pressure of them developing all over the place. And that's a good argument. Because you can always say, in trying to monitor and maintain up there, that, hey, there is a space here. So that is a good argument. One of the things that bothers me though about that is that we have some effectively directional trails already developed up there. And the one that bothers me most is the one that's most convenient for folks in town to get to and use. But on the other hand, it's exactly the type of thing that the easement says we shouldn't do. And so I would like to take that one off the map. But in terms of relieving the pressure to do something, maybe consider some other place that is less environmentally wrong according to the easement, the conservation easement. So, alternatives, and possibly one that would be less inviting for pedestrians, simply because of its difficulty. So there's a balance there that I could listen to discussions about. But I do think most of the trails should be multi-use. This is for the community, period. It's not for the hikers, it's not for the runners, it's not for the bikers, it's not for the equestrians, it's for all of the above. And as long as it meets the requirements of the conservation easement, should be open for discussion. The other thing I want to finish right now is this is kind of an experiment. We've never had anything like this before. And so we may make a decision that doesn't, or a recommendation that doesn't make everybody happy, but is an experiment. And with time, we can evolve and develop to meet or balance the interests of as many people as we possibly can. So I see this as a wrong thing.
Commissioner Fox? On that line, we talked about this a little bit on the field trip, is that I would like to see in this plan not necessarily the plan itself, but a formal statement that there will be a monitoring and maintenance plan, and that we have a fixed date for a revisit of the decisions made in this plan. So it's not like we're just gonna go until 8 o'clock. No, kind of thing, we set such a date, 2025 or 2028 or whatever, we're gonna revisit it because we're gonna be, during our monitoring phase, we're gonna be collecting these kinds of data. So we have something to make a decision on rather than I think and maybe and I heard that and kinds of data. I want to go beyond the anecdotal.
It's a good recommendation. You don't know what you don't know, so maybe things that need to be tweaked or changed, and that would be.
Just a quick follow-up to your comment, and I agree 100% on the data. I think that we're lacking some of that, and I think we really need to have data-informed decision-making here. But in terms of the trail, a use case that I think is, that really informed how I was looking at this were the two mountain bikers we saw when we were on our trip, right? They used the foots as a climbing trail, and then they descended the technical trail that had been built for mountain biking, and they just did lap after lap after lap. Makwa State Forest on Maui, I think I mentioned a few of you, to reduce mountain biker hiker impacts, did basically the same exact thing. They designed a one-way climbing trail, which was hikers and bikers. That really reduced collisions because bikers climbing that trail are not going much faster than hikers. And then the descending trail is for mountain bikers only. Hikers wouldn't be attracted to it because it's got some mountain bike features, and it's not really designed in a way that would be attractive to a hiker. So that condensed all the mountain bike use in that forest to one particular area, reduced all the social trails, and it reduced the conflict between the hikers and the bikers. And so from my perspective, I think that's kind of a win-win because it reduces that social trail creep, but gives people a feature-rich place that they want to be. If you're giving them that kind of what they're looking for, they're probably not going to go spend time trying to make those trails. And that climbing trail is multi-use, but it's low conflict because it's one way for mountain bikers, two ways for hikers. So I say multi-direction or single direction. That's kind of, it depends on potentially the user, whether it's like a hiker, both ways anytime. Biker, you're only going up kind of thing, because that's feasible when you're climbing. So that's kind of where I was coming from. And it's just watching those two kids just do lap after lap after lap really made me think of it in that perspective.
I would add to that, and I'm familiar with that trail. My son and wife live not very far from it, and I've walked up the side and I've looked. I didn't want to go down the bike portion of it. It is amazing. And it's in the forest, state forest there. And it seems to work. Parking was limited, but it seems to work. So that's a possibility in my mind, as long as the downhill portion is not destructive in terms of, and maintainable in terms of the easement and conservation. And again, that's where I'm coming from. That's my basis. Basic data that was given to the state when we applied for that application, and then the easement that they required us to have before they turned the property over to us. So I think there's some possibility. We have, how much of it? We have 5 out of 7. Since these are important decisions, you wait till we have really as much of a flow. I mean, I'd be willing to make a motion on the bikes. I know at least one other member feels that way too, on the e-bikes. So that would be 6 out of 7.
Looking for individual or plan as a whole.
It's up to you guys how you'd like to proceed. Yeah, we can work through the topics that we've been chatting about one by one and just kind of see where you lie and see if you have individual recommendations. I put together some notes for you kind of along those lines because I thought it might help direct the conversation a little bit, but it's up to you. Is there a question?
Yeah.
You might also want to take public comment before you make any decisions.
Yeah. So opening it up to public comment.
Great, thanks. I'm Rose Houghton. I live right at the foot of this place right here. I've looked at a lot of plans in my time, and this is one of the most complex plans I have seen. I've struggled with it in my brain, trying to understand what all of this spaghetti means. And that tells me I think it is over the top. It's too much. I want to say this, the Mesa is a gift and it's beautiful, and it is for humans and wildlife and plants. I'm so glad you all have brought up the origin of the easement and what we voted for to buy that land. It was for preservation, for the conservation values, open space scenery, plants, wildlife, and historical resources. I think we really need to hold on to that. Other than reclaiming a few eroded roads and maybe closing some trails, I think that's great. But I don't think we need to do all this. I really don't. I have spent a little bit of time up there myself in 30-some years of living there, and it is getting harder and harder to go up those hills. We talk about passive recreation, which I think is a very odd term, because my heart and lungs are telling me this is not a passive, even a little walk up that hill anymore. Non-motorized absolutely is part of this. It has to be non-motorized. To me, I'm sorry, but e-bikes are motorized vehicles until proven otherwise from what I have witnessed. So summarizing, I just want to say message basically, leave Observatory Mesa alone as much as possible. A quiet, undisturbed refuge for everyone in the city to go up and have, even for a few hours, some relief from the hustle and bustle of our growing city. So thanks, that's all I want to say. Thank you so much for your time. I know that the hours you have put in on this mean that you all care about this place as much as we do. So thank you.
Barb Phillips, I'm a botanist, and I have spent quite a bit of time on both forest and state lands and also on Observatory Mesa. I've walked it with other expertise people, including Nat White and Heather Green, who's a wildlife biologist, retired from the Forest Service, and other public people, and spent time up there myself, a lot of it. And the comment that I have is that I agree with Nat on the purpose of this and Rose. The purpose of this was for conservation, for preservation, to make an area of Flagstaff really close to Flagstaff that people could get to in perpetuity, knowing that the Forest Service has the ability to exchange their lands out, and they do it on a regular basis, where you build your homes and then suddenly there's another land exchange and you're living out with more homes and more homes and more homes. And I've been here for over 45 years, and I've seen that happen over again. And I am one of the ones that had to do the surveys while I was in the Forest Service and seen all those lands developed. And the impact on the wildlife and the plants that were there originally is tremendous. For the most part, they're lost. We have areas that elk migrate through. There's over 80 elk at a time coming through, and they're now going through around houses, but they're going around areas that have more open space around those houses. And so I'm wandering a little bit, but I want to say that I was dismayed at the number of acres of trails that were added by this plan, and also the idea that we wanted to make some of the roads that have existed for probably some of them for 100 years and make them into trails when they're the kinds of roads that people can go on and see more out into the forest and experience the ability to walk and not have people running over them with bikes and things like that, because they can see a longer distance. So, and have the more open areas be kept open, and it's going to have to be a managed forest, for fire and various things like that, but I don't think that we need to add the additional trails that are, evident in this, and I think keeping some of the roads that are already in existence, they may be a little bit wider, but they provide more access, quicker access. You know where you're going. If you're out in the woods and you lose your way, you come across a road, you know that's going to go somewhere. So you don't need as many signs. You might need a north, south, east, west for those people that aren't able to navigate themselves by the sun. But I think that to keep it as natural as possible and in that respect is, and I agree with the person that was talking about monitoring and looking at it again in, say, a few years, 5 years in intervals as you go forward and say, this is working, this is not working, but don't take it all at the beginning. If you need more trails 10 years down the road, that's something different. For now, keep it as minimalist as the improvements or improvements as you can for the sake of the wildlife and the plants and even the people adjacent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, folks. My name's Anthony. I'm with Flagstaff Biking Organization. I question whether or not this easement actually seems, there's this whole idea that it's meant to preserve things, and I agree with that. That's fine. But there seems to be a kind of a liberal interpretation of what preservation means and what, you know, what this is to be used for, this designation. My impression was that this was to keep these land swaps from happening and a bunch of new development from going in there. And I guess I have a question. I need to do some due diligence on my own part to figure out whether or not recreation was one of those values that was meant to be protected and employed up there. And if not, then maybe we should just close it off for everybody, because there's a lot of arbitrary and capricious decisions about which types of uses are less impactful than others. And I suggest we look at the science for those answers rather than just our personal opinions. I would suggest there's a sort of a conflict in the way that we're talking about e-bikes, because there's a slippery slope. This whole idea that, well, there's e-bikes that the state of Arizona recognizes legally as bicycles, class 1 and 2, but e-bikes are managed in all ways by the state of Arizona as all other bicycles. And but there's other kinds of e-bikes. Well, there's other kinds of conveyances. There's motorcycles and things like that. I've accidentally wound up on my motorcycle on this property several years ago because I was coming back from Kendrick Mountain, not really paying attention, and realized that was the urban trail I was on. So that was a mistake. But nonetheless, we're going to be closing this off to real motorized uses that are loud and smelly. And e-bikes 1 and 2 are not motorized uses according to the law in the state of Arizona. And I'd like to present this kind of analogy. If we're going to go on slippery slope things, I suggest we ban the entire area for dogs. Because dogs, people leave their poop bags in the woods. They let them off leash and they become dangerous. My friend Joe was bit by a guy with an off leash dog. I don't know of an e-bike that's bitten anybody. And so if people are going to violate the leash laws up there, allow their dogs to poop everywhere, leave their poop back, maybe we should just ban the dogs altogether, because it's a slippery slope allowing dogs up there. Directional bike trails, I would like to talk about that a little bit. Directional bike trails, as a few folks have expressed, actually address user conflict issues that don't exacerbate those issues. And exactly, though, I'm going to repeat what you said, but it was a very good analogy that you said, White, I think. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have folks pedaling slowly up to get back up onto the Mesa on the shared use trails, and then they're going to use the directional trails to get their yayas out. They're not going to run anybody over or scare anybody who's hiking or running or in the process. So I think that it's the idea that they are dangerous and create problems is that it's actually the exact opposite. That's been exhibited throughout the world where purpose-built directional bike trails are put in. I will also point out that directional bike trails, because some people seem to view those as somehow an affront to a natural experience, although I know that there's lots of people who disagree, that's how they experience the woods. All the three trails being proposed are all in the urban interface. They're not in the back country of this particular area. So I don't know that there's so much an aesthetic affront to that value, even for folks who might see it that way. Well-designed trails for any use, if they're designed for that use, and properly built, rather than just thrown in a landscape by some kids who had the afternoon and some shovels, are entirely sustainable and maintainable. So that's not even a question. That's also proven by best practices, trail building and trail science around the world. Make sure I'm hitting all my points here. To quick notes on my phone. I guess I'll say this in sort of closing. Actively managing for multiple uses with diverse opportunities that includes e-bikes and directional trails will yield the best results for the whole community. Arbitrarily prohibiting uses that are desired by large numbers of community members is actually a recipe for disaster. You're going to get e-bikes out there. You're not going to stop it. I don't sell bicycles anymore, but I watch the industry. People are buying e-bikes. Make rules that it is class 1 and 2 e-bikes, and you will get more community buy-in from those folks. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder. You're going to get that slippery slope. You're not going to get people going, well, wait, no, we want to protect our access. We need to make sure people are riding motorized or electric motorcycles up there.
You need to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm getting it. And then the same is true for the downhill bike trails. You're already getting them. Kids are always going to build this. We built dirt jumps when we were kids, 50 years ago. Give a kid somewhere to ride. Right next to the town is a good place to put it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think Matt spoke very well when he said we need to follow the conservation easement. And it very clearly is one of the lists. It says non-motorized. And you can say the state says a motorized, but it has a motor on it, and you cannot control what class they have. So I say non-motorized. If people sneak in with an electric bike and it's illegal, they're probably going to behave. If it's legal, they're going to just, well, from experience, they do cause trouble. The second thing I'd like to say is I'm hoping you enforce, I've been seeing a van lifer up on the natural area. They were there most of summer, and the Forest Service worked very hard to close off the people who stay there all summer on the 506 road. They were leaving big buckets of feces, and it was like a KO campground, but just trash everywhere. And they worked hard. It's cleaned up. It's beautiful. But there's still people coming in. I don't know if I should just send Robert an email about stuff like that, but that really needs, I hope that money goes towards somehow keeping van lifers and motorized traffic from that. And the last thing is with the directional trail, specifically hot pockets. I've been hiking that a lot, and it was sustainable. What I worry about is all these downhill trails are down drainages, cause sediment problems. Maybe they can construct them to where they don't. I say send all these downhill people up to Dry Lakes. Joe Hazel's building a flow trail up there, and there's an area for that. They built 14, 15, 20 miles of trail this year, and it's all concentrated. There's an area for that. And I would like to preserve the Observatory Mesa to not directional trails, not downhill trails. And like I said, this Hot Pockets, it survived. And just a few days ago, somebody started working on it again. And they didn't do good work. I mean, it's not sustainable. Water's gonna, when it rains, water's gonna bring sediment down. And unfortunately, every drainage goes into our water system. And so I'm hoping that know that they are gonna build them, and it's to build more trails and build a specific one. Kids are still gonna go to the next goal and build a trail. That's the way it's been working. Even up on dry lakes, they build all these trails and people are going down building new trails. They ride them in, and so I don't think the solution is to just build more and more, like you said, specific downhill trails, because people like to do their own thing and they're gonna go to the next goalie. I just think there needs to be enforcement.
Can you get your name?
Joan Martini.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Marcus Hoffman again. Again, I live in Linwood, so I probably am recreating either by mountain biking, running, or hiking on Observatory Mesa within this planning area 4 to 6 times a week, sometimes 2 times a day. So I'm up there a lot. Currently the area, probably 95% of the time I'm up there, even on weekends, I rarely see a person. And I'm not going off trail. I'm not on some of the social trails I'm on. Either the roads or the existing trails, running, biking, or hiking. So I really think that this plan should help to be thoughtful in the way that we look at Observatory Mesa in the future. How are we going to reasonably allow access for all people, non-motorized, I will say that, within the breadth of conserving or preserving the ecological values of that landscape. And I think that the plan as it's currently outlined is actually too much too quickly. So I would urge a slower process, research, incremental, come back and look at it again in a little bit of time. Concerning e-bikes, I think this is a huge issue that goes, again, perhaps even beyond what everybody's discussing here. While Anthony says that e-bikes are legal in the state of Arizona, e-bikes are not accepted by the Forest Service. They are a motorized vehicle. And if this commission and the city council were to approve e-bikes, they would have to go to the Forest Service and ask for a specific exception, I believe, for e-bikes in this landscape. So the problem with that is it potentially sets up a bad precedent that could have national implications. So one place where the Forest Service would allow e-bikes, why not allow them in every place that's non-motorized? So I'm very, very concerned about that. E-bikes also, a lot of this whole discussion is about conflict between bikers and hikers and Midwestern people. And why is that? It's because I think largely it's caused by bikers. Bikers are going really, really fast a lot of times, and they sometimes don't have the patience. A few percentage, a small percentage, don't have the patience for us that are running or hiking to slow down or to let us get out of the way in a reasonable time fashion. And I think that having e-bikes is just going to exacerbate that. I'm not against mountain biking. I'm a mountain biker myself. I love the mountain bike. But I think we need to have a reasonable balance here. And I think e-bikes go off the cliff in terms of a balance. And I really am buoyed by hearing some of you commissioners saying that you don't think that e-bikes are appropriate. And I hope that that is off the table immediately. I don't think we want to make Observatory Mesa another Dry Lake Hills. I applaud the trail work that's been done up there and the trail construction. I think it's actually probably in the long run will help to protect a lot of the landscape, but it also has created a very fast-paced environment. And my wife, who is somewhat handicapped, has had multiple instances where hiking and a biker is coming either up or down. Either way, they're going faster than she is. And she just gets panicked and jumps off the trail. And she's actually had pretty significant head injuries on 2 instances because of mountain bikers. So I just thank you for your real thoughtful consideration in this, the planning process. E-bikes, I think, really should be off the table and a slower process for developing trails like Observatory Mesa. Thanks.
Thank you.
I apologize to everybody, but I was supposed to be home today.
We still have a forum, so. Continue.
My name is Joe Hazel. I'm a geologist and trail coordinator with the Flagstaff Biking Organization. And, the commission, I'd just like to make 2 points, so I'll be brief. I've looked at a lot of trail plans, not just for Flagstaff, but if you take out section 17, which is the Observatory Mesa, the rest is actually not that overly complex. The thing to think about here, I moved here in 1986, and I think the population of Flagstaff was 30,000, maybe 35. What is it now? 70,000, 75. I mean, we need to think not just about today, we need to think about tomorrow. What's the future going to bring? We're going to be 100,000 people by 2030. This is in Flagstaff's backyard. And all of us in here, we all love wildlife, but this is also a place where people are going to recreate, and it's not going to stop unless we put up a wall. And for the trail planners, I think Mark in the back or Robert, there's 2 system trails that are currently on the system being maintained. It's the urban trail, the Futz Tunnel Springs, and it's the section of the Observatory Mesa Trail, the Loop Trail. So that's 3, maybe, I don't know what it is, 7 miles. What's the percentage of social trails that the public is seeking to choose out to recreate on in the observatory planning area? 100? I mean, so we're not addressing the recreational needs of the public. So it's a balance, of course, between the wildlife needs of the Woody Mountain Block, peaks, wildlife corridor, versus what the recreational pressure is from the city, but it's coming. And we need to think about that and address it. And then if you could help me with, so the total percentage of trails being proposed, some of the social trails for adopted or new ones built is 20 miles. It's about 20 miles.
Yeah.
Of that 20 miles, what is the percentage that proposed that are directional mountain bike trails? Does it even total 1 mile? I don't think so. I mean, Hot Pockets is maybe 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet. Like, what are the other 2? I don't actually have the numbers in front of me, but it's a very small percentage of actually what's being planned. So give those kids a place to go. That's it. Thanks. Thank you for your time.
Hi, everyone. I realized I didn't send the name last time. Mike Polkjoy. Thanks for the chance to talk. I really just want to talk about the motorized issues. As many folks have brought up, the conservation easement clearly says that it will allow for non-motorized use of trails. E-bikes have motors on them. And so I guess from my perspective, I don't see how e-bikes could legally be allowed up there in light of what the conservation easement says, unless the commission took the stance that they were motorized vehicles, which, as Marcos and others said, is not the stance that most land management agencies take. Second comment I wanted to make was regarding the roads. There's some places where there's a bit of duplicity between where a trail is and where an existing road is. I understand that the Forest Service, and I may be wrong about this, but has easements for those roads that cross city land. And so I just encourage the commission to also think about restricting or working with the forest to restrict or modify motorized access in those areas. Whether those roads are left as they are, or they're replaced with trails, I think is a different discussion, but there's a lot of motorized use, as folks have said, that happens up there, including camping, on some of the city parcels without enforcement. And the last comment I wanted to make was just about directional trails, in the discussion of providing sort of equitable access for everyone, I think one thing worth recognizing is if you go down the directional trails route, it means more trails overall. There's a directional downhill mountain biking trail. Hikers, runners are going to want an uphill trail. And so I think there's truth to the idea that it reduces user conflict, but it also entails more trail mileage on the ground if you're going to build a trail that caters to every specific use. Thanks.
I'm Sean Mahoney. I live adjacent. So I live where the loop trail comes up. So right here is where I live. And I've been working on that trail for years. Been gone for a year and a half, so I'm back again. So I live adjacent. And with the Observatory Mesa, I hike, I bike, I do it every day. Walk my dog out there and love the trails. I want to share this with the rest of Flagstaff. And it's going to happen. And there's a great comment here. With the plan that you all are working with, is fantastic. I mean, the amount of work that's going on here is amazing. With a plan, you can control it, you can monitor it, you can maintain it. Without a plan, you're going to get what you got now. And I ride and I walk and I hike and I do all the stuff on the social trails. I'm on social trails 90% of the time. I'm on the loop trail the rest of the time. With this is a great plan. This is something that can move forward, can get people using it the proper way. We can maintain it. Key piece. We can have this done and it will eliminate a whole bunch of social trails that can't be maintained and aren't good. Great plan, great compromise. There are places here where some of my favorite trails are gone. That's okay with me because the grand scheme of things, it's a compromise. And I see people nodding, I see people shake their head negatively. Compromise is, we're never in this room or on the commission, is everybody going to say, yep, we all agree. It's coming up with something that works for the majority. Thank you.
Am I able to speak as a online person?
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm a homeowner in the Westridge neighborhood on Observatory Mesa. And I'm definitely concerned about how much trail system is getting put in. I go up there every day and I see people out there and it's getting used very extensively, just the way it is. We, as Westridge neighborhood, we are on private roads. Currently a lot of the neighbors down below us use the access, and that's fine. It causes some issues, but if you start adding more and more trails and advertising, we're going to start seeing a lot more issues. The issues that we're experiencing now is people driving too fast, creating a lot of dust. The hill that we have access to our Forest Service access or the city access, it's a very steep trail and you really need four-wheel drive in the winter. And we had a lot of people coming up, blocking the road because they get stuck. They go off the road, they get stuck in the middle of the road. We get people parking on the road itself at the access. We have a lot of people trespassing through private land to get to these areas. And we, as a community up at, our neighborhood, we have to pay for the repairs of that road. So, right now we pay for the repairs, but if you have more people coming up because you've got more trails and you're advertising it, and, we're going to have more issues in our area. And I don't see the city helping us at all with that. I don't think any amount of monitoring is going to help us. It's going to get worse. And, when Flagstaff voted to approve the funds for this $6 million grant, it was to make it a natural area, not a recreational area. And right now it's still a natural area. However, just putting in that loop trail, we as the neighborhood have seen a very noticeable decrease in the amount of elk that even use that natural area, that critical pathway. And we've seen less coyotes, less foxes. And if you go in there and add all those trails you're proposing, you're going to really impact those animals. I'm just asking this commission to uphold the promise the city made to the people of Flagstaff when purchasing this land with our taxpayer dollars to preserve this as a natural area. This area is being used, and it's being used very respectfully, and it doesn't need more, and it doesn't need advertising. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Allison Gitlin, and I'm gonna confuse you now because I'm here speaking as a Flagstaff resident, but I also wrote a letter to the city council about this on behalf of Sierra Club Grand Union chapter. A lot of what I talk about is gonna be in agreement with that letter, because I wrote it. But this area is truly a people's park. It was purchased by the people of Flagstaff, and a lot of those people don't even know that there is a trail plan going on here. When it was purchased, voted on in 2004, it was to be a natural area and not a recreational demonstration area. It is clearly, as many people have noted, called a non-motorized area, and e-bikes have motors. I don't think that this area should be used to change policy of how lands are managed in the region. And so just to echo what Martos brought up, Flagstaff Biking Organization sent an email out earlier this year promoting an urgent, all caps with an exclamation point, need to advocate for directional bike trails, e-bikes, etc. And a quote from that letter is that because the U.S. Forest Service has nationally designated e-bikes as motorized vehicles, it will be extremely challenging for the Coconino National Forest and/or Flagstaff Ranger District to redesignate any currently non-motorized routes to legally allow e-bikes to use them. This project can then act as a demonstration project. Without this project, the Coconino National Forest Flagstaff Ranger District will be less apt to permit e-bikes on any currently non-motorized routes in the foreseeable future. Now, that's a quote from a letter that was sent out. I disagree that this area should be a recreational demonstration area for the purpose of changing Forest Service policy in the region. In Sedona, there are directional trails that aren't necessarily, they're directional for bikes, but they're equal right of way for all users. If there is to be a consideration of directional trails or single-use trails, I would recommend something more like that model. Single-use trails are an equity issue. We purchased this. The city of Flagstaff citizens purchased this with our money. And to tell certain users that they can't be on a trail is an equity issue. To say you need to be able to afford a bike and be able to ride it, or you can't be on that trail is an equity issue, and that is not fair. Especially if our tax dollars purchase this land and, you know, our volunteer hours are going to go to build. So I really wholeheartedly believe that we should be considering this as a natural area, as a non-motorized area, and be consistent with our local Forest Service policy. I hear in my job from people all the time who want quiet places to recreate, who want slower places to recreate, who want wildlife areas and wildlife corridors to be kept intact. And I don't see in this where there's an area for wildlife corridors set aside and then recreational trails built around it. And we advocated for a similar thing on the Mount Eldon trails and didn't get it there either. And to say that there's not places near town for people to go, so they have to come here, I think is ridiculous because there's a lot of new trails going on in the Mount Eldon area. So as someone who lives a half a block from this and is here every single day, yes, I do see an increase in use, but I also saw an increase in use as a result of advertising the fact that this trail plan even exists. And this is just too much. And so I'm not going to comment on the exact parts of this plan, but I will say as far as those specifics that you're considering, please non-motorized, please equal access. And just think of this as a natural area and think of the wildlife and protecting soils and all of that. Thank you.
What else? Like,
No.
the comment?
So I'm back again, but I really want to reiterate that, or ask, I want to ask the commission, have you ever had this many people show up to talk with you? Have you? No? So my point is, this process is flawed because people are now showing up. We contacted Hidden Hollow people to say, are you aware of this? I don't control what people say, but I want the commission to be better informed by people who use these areas so that you can make better decisions. And you may need to back up a little bit. You may need to say, we're not taking this to council after one more round. Maybe we need to listen to the people who have used this area for a really long time, and have a lot of knowledge, and you can incorporate that. And as someone who lives at the base of Mars Hill and is seeing use explode, and last winter was absolutely insane with people and parking and dog feces everywhere. I couldn't even go up in the woods anymore. So most of this development is off of Thorpe Park. So I've had staff tell me, oh no, people will go out 66 to park. I don't believe it. They're gonna park in Thorpe Park and we don't have enough parking as it is. So they're gonna end up in front of our houses. I had a van life person parked in front of my garden for days on end and left me a gift in my because there were no public facilities. Now they did put in a bathroom in Thorpe Park and maybe that will help. But really, if you could just listen to the people who will have to absorb all the impacts and who have knowledge, you'll come up with a better document. You'll have a better outcome than if you forge ahead and think you know it all, because you don't have decades of experience. So please, the commission can send a postcard to everybody who lives around the Mesa. Have a big meeting and listen to more people, because they'll have more ideas and more knowledge. So, thank you.
It's online comments.
Oh, right, sorry. Person online? You have a comment?
Yes, I'd like to comment.
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Rick Moore, and I would like to thank all of the commissioners for taking the time and energy to be on the commission and put in these late evenings. I've been walking on Observatory Mesa for 30 years, and I deeply appreciate the opportunities it's provided for experiencing a natural environment, as well as the peace and solitude I could find up there. I also appreciate that it provides high quality habitat for deer, pronghorn, birds, and other wildlife. I believe that having a thoughtful trail system that minimizes impacts on the land and wildlife, providing opportunities for connecting with the natural world in a quiet, peaceful way is good, but I'm concerned that the proposed plan does not provide those opportunities. So I hope that you'll consider just a few things as you think about this plan. Many of them have been mentioned. I just want to touch on them briefly. I don't need to repeat everything that everybody else has said. But recreation is secondary at best to preservation. Please remember that this plan is for the Observatory Mesa natural area. And the city's open space management plan says the importance of preserving the unique conservation values associated with the property, including open space value, unique scenic value, native vegetation communities, diverse wildlife habitats, and cultural resources all are important. Note, please, that recreation is not mentioned. Increasing visitation will negatively impact the wildlife and also just Flagstaff residents and others who go to the Mesa. I'm really concerned that the character of the Mesa and the user experience will be dramatically changed by developing and promoting Observatory Mesa as a recreation area, which is essentially what this plan does, rather than a natural area. The Mesa is one of the few places close to the town that provides a natural, peaceful, quiet area to connect with nature, and it should remain that way. Touching on e-bikes, I think people covered that pretty well. I agree, they are motorized and they should not be allowed. I think there are too many trails. This plan is too complex, as one of the earlier commenters mentioned. As a matter of fact, the plan characterizes the current 15 miles of user-created trails as, quote, a vast network. But then the plan goes on to call for more than twice that many miles of official trails. It's hard to believe that 32 miles of trails located on roughly 6 square miles of land will not impact the deer, pronghorn, and other wildlife living on the Mesa. It seems borne out by the person who lives on Westridge up there talking about what the impacts they've seen on wildlife. So I believe that the number of official trails up there should be reduced. So thanks for the opportunity to provide a few thoughts on this, and lots of luck trying to figure this out. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments.
I think there's more.
Person online? Comment?
No, there's no.
All right. Okay. About this item, I know we had talked about maybe taking these things one at a time. I think that's a good way to go, but I don't know that we're ready to vote on any of them tonight. So, continue, to the next meeting. So
Robert, in our package for like the next meeting, would you give us like a sort of a line item of these are the, what we're gonna be expected to take as line item? Oh, yes.
Could you tell us, how about we reverse that? Could you tell us which line items you'd like to specifically make a recommendation on? Because I think if we go through every element of the plan and ask for a specific recommendation, it's gonna be like 20 recommendations. If that's the way you'd like to go, that's great.
Yeah.
But if you'd rather it be focused on a few key issues, we would like to hear that from you.
I got a suggestion, and this goes back to kind of first principles concepts. A lot of talk has been made of the conservation easement, the open space plan, the strategy, the value of recreation, when it's mentioned, when it's not. I think we got to start back there and come to some level of consensus about what those actual charter documents mean. I'm very much aligned with trying to be true to what that says, but I'm not going to take everybody's word for it. It's just, cherry picking comments from whatever document supports their argument. Because I read some of them very differently. And I think the first principles approach would be to start with that. I know that sets us back time-wise, but there's no rush to do this. The only thing we should do is do it right. So I would propose that and a close reading of the documents that inform the entire process from the conservation easement through our own strategy and everything else that we need to be accountable to, as opposed to, hey, it says this. Maybe it does. Maybe it's somewhere else it says something slightly different. So rather than moving straight to let's vote on these things over here, because that's going to be our personal opinion and anecdotal information. In large part, I know we're trying to be as objective as we can, but that's a first principles approach, is going back to those source documents and making sure we're doing that right.
I agree, and I did it, and I think we all should, and folks that are interested in this topic should look at it and go right back to the application to the state where the base data was sent. The reason we were asking for this property, to purchase this property, and then the conservation easement was kind of the reply to that application. So that application, I think, contains a lot of the sentiment that at least the state observed. Obviously, that application wasn't shared with the whole community. It was developed by the city. But that's the way it is. That was the application. Conservation easement, I think, followed from that. And then the vote and purchase. So I agree with that, although I still think we worked on this a long time. And I know Rose is very interested in taking some actions, because once we take some actions, then we can start talking about how it's implemented and how we maintain it. And is there a group out there that wants to form that will support maintenance and monitoring of that area? There's a whole bunch of things that really need to follow after we make these decisions. So again, I think that's important, but should we be tasked to receive that information and read it for the next meeting? And if we did that, the result, the action item at the next meeting would be some kind of agreement of what is expected, some general agreement. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm saying that from my perspective, which documents should we actually be considering, right? Like, so to what extent should the original conservation easement and the application inform the decisions that we're making? Because I think if we're in general alignment on that, it'll be a little bit easier to try to make decisions. But I also know that and maybe staff can help us with this in terms of, like, how do we get to the place that we're a trail plan, right? Is it because we're trying to manage existing stuff that was happening without the involvement of any city officials, because all the social stuff? Is it because there's some charter about recreation and recreation is a value, which I have read and I've seen. I've done the same thing you have to do my due diligence. And I think recreation as a value is reflected in the planning and the other documents. And so we seem to be like loggerheads. Well, this is not designed for recreation. This is a natural area. And it's like the original purpose of the entire area is in question, right? And so we're proposing to do all these things without really first sort of level setting on what we're actually trying to do there writ large, strategically, 50,000 feet. We're already down in the weeds here about e-bikes and directional trails and these other things. I'm just looking at it from a first principles kind of approach. And that's just my input. I feel free to disagree.
No, I agree with it. I've done it. We also probably do it and have a general discussion. That's what I'm trying to do. What would be a good agenda item for the next meeting? Would it be a consensus on what all of this means? All of this meaning the documents. That I agree, that would be a big step. And then we use that as a filter to look at everything else. However, on the e-bike situation, I think that I don't think e-bikes should be up there at this time. Maybe sometime later on when we get our act together and the maintenance and the monitoring and all the rest of it, it could be reconsidered. So it's just, my experience with that, whatever it was that went by there, me yelling at it and not even be able to hear it, led to me feeling that's the wrong time right now. We just can't monitor it, control it, or whatever else. And if we have no e-bikes up there, then there's no excuse if one's up there. So that one, I'm pretty firm on at this point.
Just have a comment. I just want to say, like, this is supposed to go to council as our recommendation of what we would like them to adopt so that potentially, grants could be applied for, because there's no funding for this, right? So that's the end goal, is to get this to council, have them adopt it so that it can open up the doors to potential funding. When I first joined this commission, I don't know, 2 years ago, I think almost now, I think that was the first iteration of the trail plan, and that's when it was going out to the outreach of the community. The community had difficulties with all of the different access points. So it got reeled back in. And then when we reintroduced it, and we really have almost a whole different commission now, we've had turnover. That's when we really started looking at those original documents, those origin documents. So I do think it would be worthwhile for us to reel back a little bit. Let's regroup, look at those documents, make sure that the entire commission does understand them. And then we do have all this other groundwork to, I think, quickly move forward on picking apart those individual aspects so that we could come to a full recommendation of the trail plan to give to council.
I agree. I think it's imperative that we look at the, like you say, the origin documents and see what they say. And it doesn't mean we're, have to, start over again. I mean, we have done a lot of work, and I think looking at those documents will inform us in our decisions for those different aspects of the trail plan. So I think it would be worthwhile to take a look at that.
We can do our front end work and read them again, and I poured over these things. And so this is why I'm a little bit of a conflict here, because I did see recreation as a value. And so I'm hearing that it's definitely not. I'm like, this is a fundamental disagreement in the purpose of the area. If we can't even come to agreement on that, how do we then tactically come up with something that, is useful? So that's just my perspective. So I like it. If we could do that, then that'd be very good.
Yeah. Recreation is in there. The definition of it. That's where we're at.
Right.
Which documents specifically do you want to make sure that we send out for all the commissioners that are here and not here? For their information, let's just make sure we're on the same page, please.
One of the original application.
The original application and that base data document that was built. I think Ursula Montoya had a lot to do with it, so it was around 2000. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet.
If
We can
you,
chat about it.
if you've seen that recently, maybe you could send it. I'm sure we have it. We're just calling it different things probably.
Yeah, right. I may have a copy of it, but it's referred to in the whereas statements, the easement, conservation easement. And I assumed it was with the part of the application.
Look it up.
I may have a copy of it.
And then the
And then
easement.
the conservation.
The easement itself, all the city's documents around its intent, from the creation of the Open Space Commission, the intent and mission, and all of that stuff, and to include our own strategic plan that we just worked on last year.
Also include advertisements as far as the bond issue.
Yeah, what it was pitched to the people.
The publicity.
What were the citizens told this was gonna be? What were they voting for? All that stuff, I think, is forms how we do this.
Okay, thanks for those examples. We'll make sure to pull. It might be more than that by the time we're digging through. So the agenda item for the next meeting will be to review those documents ahead of time and come to the meeting ready to discuss the intent of those documents and how it relates to this plan. And then identify next steps. How's that look?
Sounds good.
Hopefully somebody caught that.
All right, so we continue. We'll take that up at the next meeting.
Could I make a request?
Yep.
This is Rick Moore again. Could you also make sure that those documents are available for the public, not just the commission?
Yep, we'll attach.
Thank you.
Finished with that item. There's one other item on the agenda that Hopefully we can get through pretty quick. Item C is a joint meeting date selection between the Parks and Rec Commission and the Open Space Commission.
Yeah, I think when we were going through our strategic plan, the commission elected to have a collaborative meeting with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and we have a date consideration of January 22nd. Although I think that's a normal date.
Yeah, so the other issue at play here is that the Parks and Recreation Commission will not be able to meet. Just making sure we have all commissioners, since we don't have quorum if we don't. So the Parks and Recreation Commission, next two meetings fall on federal holidays and city holidays. So they're already looking to reschedule one of their meetings. So they thought that might be a good opportunity to join with the Open Space Commission at one of your regularly scheduled meetings. And kind of meet both intents of them still having a monthly meeting and also having that joint meeting that we had talked about. January was a good recommendation because that's good timing on our budget process. So we could give kind of an overview of both Parks and Rec and open space budgeting, long-term planning, capital improvement projects, the BBB Recreation Fund, the projects planned within that, any updates we might have on BBB Recreation Fund itself, like for example, the BBB tax is coming up for renewal. So it's good timing to talk about that, but you have a lot on your plates right now for January. So I'm kind of leaning away from that. We could do a very similar presentation at your meeting in February. And Parks and Rec can figure out something else for January. I'm not sure your plates are going to be less full in February either, but we could also plan around that.
That sounds good to me.
Planning for February.
And then bump it if we have to.
Yeah, February, yeah.
I'd say that's
We need to take care of or continue the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the turnout here, 100% to me, this is like top of the radar sort of issue that we should be focusing on. Yeah, my opinion.
And is the Hidden Hollow thing, do you think that'll come back in January?
The property owners are definitely interested in having them move forward. So, yeah.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Yes, there is interest in it being on the next agenda in January.
Okay. So those are
That said,
two-
we are going through the budgetary process right now, which takes a lot of effort. So if the commission needs a lot of additional information for that in January, I would actually suggest that we put that on February agenda rather than.
I think it needs to, we need to continue the Hidden Hollow conversation. Sorry, Robert. I'm with Commissioner Applin here. We need to keep that conversation. And it's already, your January meeting is the 22nd. So it's 6 weeks away. So we're already just naturally going to lose a little bit of momentum, and we'll have to kind of rebuild that at that January meeting. But I think we can pull together. We'll see if we can get the planners and the property owner's engineer here. I think they were actually online today, but they didn't raise their hand to speak to answer some of your questions. And then start this conversation about the Observatory Mesa originating documents and guiding documents. And that sounds like a pretty full January meeting to me. If we plan in February for the joint meeting with Parks and Rec, then we can plan your other agenda items around it. But I think in January, you get to these hot topic issues right away. And then you can let the public know in January, hey, in February, we're not going to be talking about this. We're going to focus on this instead because of the timing. And then you can pick back up with whatever.
I'm a little concerned with the Hidden Hollow thing.
Because it's so, a decision there needs to be filtered through the discussion we're gonna have about the easement and all the other things. You know, it's,
We could put the trail plan or the discussion, it's not even, it doesn't even have to be a trail plan conversation. It could be a discussion on the guiding documents first.
that's what I mean. And if we all come
As
to
an
the
agenda
consensus
item.
on that, that could have an effect on Hidden Hollow, because it goes right through one of the ravines that is protected, that is brought out and protected. And the other part that I worry about on the Hidden Hollow situation is we raise a bunch of questions that not only the city has to go through, but whoever these property owners have to go through as far as the county is concerned. And that's gonna be on their agenda. And I realize it's become a hot agenda in the last 2 weeks, as far as the petition is concerned. But that doesn't mean we'll have all the answers by January at all, and even make a decision.
No, and we won't be asking you to, based on everything that was said today, I don't think we're gonna be expecting a recommendation from the commission anytime soon.
So it would be more of an update.
They'll just continue to provide information. I think in January, we can focus on the guiding document review first. And then on the Hidden Hollow access, we can bring in the planners and the engineers to answer those specific questions that you might have. And then maybe in March, we bring in the county and state parks, like we can put together that plan moving
Okay.
forward with the commission.
That sounds okay. And I must say, and I think we all agree, at least the two people, the two owners that spoke, that was fit. And if they could just have that small dirt road going up there, that might fit. I don't know. Well, they had the legal rights for it. So there'd be no discussion. So there's great sympathy on my part for them.
Can I ask you a question here? Just want to publicly ask this on the record. So do I need to recuse myself? Because I'm looking at a place on Hidden Hollow Road.
Do you own it yet?
Nope, I don't. And I'm just gonna lease it. Quite honestly, I'm not gonna buy it.
Yeah,
So
I don't see
is there
that
a
as a, I
conflict of
don't
interest?
see that as a conflict of interest.
I also live in Linwood, which is also on here a lot. So am I okay to continue these discussions?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, if you have a financial,
No, I don't have any financial interest in any of these contractors or anything like that. I just want to be upfront about that, so everybody knew that transparently.
appreciate the transparency though.
Yeah.
You bring a great perspective.
Can I ask a question? Yes. I wasn't sure. Were any of the other property owners present, or was it just the two families? Which were,
As far as I know, it's just the two, but I wanted to ask that question.
well, it's just, yeah, it just seems like two families with the smallest property that's at stake. And then we don't know who the other property owners are that have a much bigger stake.
Yeah.
Or what their
Yeah,
intentions
what
are.
their intentions are.
I would love to hear from the fire department too. I'm big on challenging requirements. Sometimes, it's like, hey, we have to have a heat shield under here, and then somebody actually figured out, you don't actually need a heat shield, we can send the rocket up tomorrow. And I'd like to just get the firefighters in here and ask them, like, what is this exactly based on these requirements that you're saying must be met? I'm not saying that's not true,
Yeah.
but I just think challenging the requirements is a good place to start.
You know, we would have gotten along well on the city council. Because a lot of those requirements are just national requirements,
Also,
which you can take or leave.
Right. These are they guidelines? Are they
So they need to
laws?
be,
Oh,
we're getting back into the agenda item.
Oh, sorry.
and completion.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, that's why I'm here.
So we've decided we're, the meeting in February is the joint meeting.
Yes, and I would request so that our Parks and Rec commissioners can plan for that special date as well, and we can start planning the agenda topics. If we could plan your other topics around that so that February can kind of be this focused joint meeting. If something happens in January and you don't feel that that's appropriate anymore, then we can definitely regroup. But if we could focus on that
Because we do have Parks and Rec meeting next week, and I'd like to be able to tell them this as a suggestion for February.
It's good.
Incidentally, as far as meeting agenda items are concerned, was, planning and zoning lady gonna announce?
Yeah, so I have that we will request our planning department to attend to answer your questions about lot splits and subdivisions and how many,
Well, I was
is that
thinking-
what you're referring to?
No, I was referring to a discussion we had about in the planning department, how to bring open space up as part of a conversation in any of the planning discussions.
I'm just gonna actually touch on that in my little update.
We did invite Tiffany Antal.
Yeah, and
And she wasn't available to make it this month. I've already messaged her about next month.
well, that's what I'm saying.
It seems like maybe our agenda's gonna be pretty full next month, so I think we might have to look at like
Yeah.
bumping her. Although, I want.
I just didn't want to
be
get,
listed as a potential future agenda item.
I see it as a long-term discussion.
Alright. Move on to reports, updates. And,
You want me to?
just like,
Just real quick,
Yeah.
so that open spaces terminology changed to the zoning code that it did proceed through, P and Z and city council, and they adopted it at their December 5th council meeting. So the term open spaces is now reserved for actual open space land usage, while the development department will use common space and private space when describing their development standards within a community development. Through the process, I did bring up our request, and you had written a letter, as well as Nat wrote a letter, where we had desired some reference to a definition for open space, and of course, it was kind of deemed not applicable to that area of the zoning code. And it didn't come up at the council discussion. I did bring it up at the planning and zoning discussion with Tiffany, and because there was no note of public comment, and I said, well, I saw a letter from Nat White, does he count as a public commenter, or is that from our commission? And she mentioned that she met with you and talked a little bit about that. So, but anyway, it kind of, I think, stopped there, at least in a public forum. So I'm hoping that between our commission and, us as commissioners and your contact that you've now made with her, that we can, continue to keep that conversation going with the development department. So that was all.
I'm saying,
I don't think I have anything, but if anybody has any questions, let me know.
and I guess on the agenda, you can read all the potential future agenda items. Probably go through all those. Next is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Someone,
Second.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody's extra minutes today. No problem.
and
Yeah. Give us this. Just. Success and did.
It was correct.
are we muted now?
What's that?
Are we muted?
I don't think so, no, we have a month.
So, recording. Thank you for asking.